Hey everyone, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for helping me reach 100 subscribers. I honestly couldn't have done this without your love, support, and constant encouragement. Every like, comment, and subscribe means a lot to me. Now let's keep this journey going. Our next target is 200 subscribers, and I know we can do it together. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's grow as a family. Thank you once again. When Luffy vanishes inside ancient ruins, the Straw Hats are pulled into a terrifying journey through his past. Trapped within Luffy's memories, the crew witnesses moments of brotherhood with Ace and Sabo, childhood pain, and scars Luffy never shared. As past and present blur, the Straw Hats must confront truths that were never meant for them to see, learning what truly shaped their captain. To escape, they must not only find Luffy, but also come to terms with the weight of the memories he carried alone. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Warm Memories and Brotherly Bonds by RoseDragonWitch.
Chapter 44, Dream a Little Dream. Chapter 43, Dream a Little Dream. I gotta tell you, Frankie said, his head low as they stared ahead of them at the pressing darkness. That was really hard to watch. None of them could ever forget that day. In a blink of an eye, they were all so easily defeated and separated to who knows where. Even though they all knew now that it was thanks to Kuma's mercy that they were all still alive, it didn't make it any easier to see. After all that they had seen and gone through together up to that point, it was all rendered next to nothing in the span of just one day. It was hard on them all, but for Luffy it was probably the worst since he was the one who had to witness it all. Forced to watch each one of them go without doing anything to stop it. So, that was what happened after I left, Zoro whispered. He had constantly wondered what had happened to everyone after he was sent flying. He had guesses, but to have it confirmed was worse than anything else. He almost wished that he didn't find out. They all looked grimly at each other. We were all just so helpless, Sanji hissed to himself. He completely lost his head back there and went charging in like that. How stupid was he? We just didn't stand a chance, Nami added in a whisper, looking away, still feeling the tears in her eyes at what happened as she raised her face after hiding it in Robin's shirt. But at least we're all alive and back together again, Brook pointed out, determined to have something that they could be grateful for. And we're stronger than ever so we don't ever have to worry about that happening again. That's what we put those 2 years of training for, right? To stay together, Chopper nodded, rubbing his eyes furiously. So does this mean that we'll be seeing everything that happened, after that? If you mean the war and everything else, then we should, Sanji sighed, lighting up another cigarette, and had a feeling that he would be smoking a lot more than usual for a while. Looks like we're finally gonna be getting some answers as to what happened while we were all occupied, Robin sighed, patting Nami's shoulders and waited until she was able to dry her eyes and look up before she smiled encouragingly at her. So the island where Luffy-san was sent to? Brook asked. That's what we're going to be seeing next. Most likely, Robin confirmed. The island, Usopp said, thinking back to when they all were leaving Sabayati when they reunited. He suddenly remembered Luffy telling them where he'd had been. I think he said something about Maiden Island. The legendary female-only island. Brook asked in surprise and Sanji froze at that. Women only. He repeated to himself, and when he turned to look at them all, fire was burning in his eyes and his face took on something like a devil. You mean to tell me that rubber-headed idiot was in paradise all that time and I was in hell? Well, if you had been sent there, you'd have spent all your time serving the women and I doubt that you would have gotten any training done, Robin offered. But Sanji was too far away in his own sorrows to notice what she had said. I need to see it, he declared. I need to see with my own eyes if it's the truth. And then I will kill Luffy. Should we be concerned? Chopper asked the others anxiously as they stood farther away from him as he burned furiously. Well, I doubt that he could go as far as to kill Luffy, but maybe we should knock him out or something so that he doesn't have to see anything. Nami whispered. That's going a little overboard, don't you think? Usopp asked. Perhaps, Robin whispered, but, in the end we have to do what's best for his health. And who knows how well he'll take it if it turns out that it was true. Though I doubt that anything serious happened to Luffy while he was there. At least nothing that I'm sure that Sanji would have done if it had been him, Nami whispered back just as the next memory appeared at last. They were standing on the edge of a river in the dead of night and they were looking around in great surprise. There was a bright moon overhead where they could see the houses built around them with the sliding doors, and there were large logs floating in the river next to them, showing that this had to be some kind of mill. This is the island Luffy was sent to? Chopper asked in confusion. Maybe, Robin said, but she suddenly had a very strange feeling in the pit of her stomach about all this. Zoro stepped forward and was looking around, suddenly feeling nostalgic. This place reminded him of his hometown. Back at the dojo, But before he could really figure out what was going on, he heard the sounds of running footsteps. He pointed ahead of them where they saw a figure running towards them, wearing a rather baggy kimono and an umbrella hat covering the person's face so that they couldn't see them. "Who's that?" Chopper asked as the person ducked down to an alleyway and they heard them panting for breath, as if they had just run a great distance. They watched as he cautiously looked around the corner of the house he was hiding behind, as if afraid that he had been followed. But just then they heard a voice speak up loudly. "Give it up." The figure jumped and they looked down the alleyway to see that 3 people had apparently been waiting there. "Who are these losers?" Sanji asked, narrowing his eyes at them. All 3 of the figures were dressed in simple kimonos as well, and they were carrying staffs and several katana with them as they walked straight towards the lone figure. "We'll never let you get away. All these guys to take on one person?" Zoro asked, raising his eyebrows as the figure took a few steps back, before several other men appeared there, obviously having been the people who had followed them here. But in the low light, they could see their faces this time and they were all surprised to see that they were painted white with traces of red and blue on it that made them look a lot like clowns. "Weird as all of them," Frankie whispered, suddenly reminded of that buffoon the clown loser from before. But Sanji was frowning as he looked at the figure. "Who is he?" he asked, trying to get a view of that person's face. "Is it just me, or does he seem really familiar to you guys?" "You know, now that you mention it, he does seem really familiar for some reason." Nami frowned as well, studying that figure. There was something about how they moved that seemed to ring a little bell inside her head. "You're worth an awful lot of money," one of the men said, coming to them, "and if you come with us quietly, we'll go easy on you." "You think that they're bounty hunters or something?" Brook asked as the figure seemed to be weighing their options. "And that fellow is some kind of pirate." "I don't think so," Zoro said as the man reached for the figure's arm, but at that moment there was a flash of a blade, and the helpless figure suddenly had a knife in their hands and had cut the man's arm. "Back off!" They screamed at them and Nami's eyes widened. "That voice," she whispered to herself. "No, it couldn't be. That's a woman's voice." Sanji cried out at once, suddenly understanding what this was about. And to hell with them if they hurt her. But that knife ticked the mugger off and he pulled out his katana that had been hanging at his side and knocked the knife right out of her hands, and when Sanji saw them knock her to the ground, with her arm suddenly bleeding, he burst into flames. "Those bastards!" Sanji roared as the woman clutched her arm. "How dare they harm a lady?" He jumped in and stood protectively in front of the girl, ready to fight them all, but was now steaming from the mouth when none of his kicks did any good. But he wasn't the only one either, they were all wanting to jump in and help the poor girl, who was clearly in a lot of trouble. But as the muggers drew in around her, another person had made his appearance. They looked back in time to see that there had been a boat near the shore, and that someone was pushing off a blanket of straw and was getting to his feet. "A monk?" Zoro asked as he looked at the green covering over the baggy kimono, the large beads around his neck, and the even larger umbrella hat covering his own face. Using a staff, he pushed himself to his feet and was looking over at them with annoyance in his stance. "How do you know that it's a monk?" Usopp asked in surprise. "I used to see a couple of them back at my home island," Zoro answered, but damn, why was this guy so familiar to him? "Who the hell are you?" one of the men demanded as the monk jumped over to stand in front of them. "What do you want?" "I just wanted to talk," the monk said, and that was when they recognized that voice at once. It was Zoro's voice. Zoro stared as the monk pushed his hat back just slightly and they gasped at seeing Zoro's face there. "What's going on here?" Present Zoro gasped out. That can't be me. I'm a monk." But no one knew what to say as they stared at the figures in front of them. "What's going on here?" Monk Zoro asked, looking at them all and to the woman on the ground and then up to the weapons in the mugger's hands. The men all sneered at him, telling him that they weren't interested in him, but were wondering if he was planning a rescue. Monk Zoro didn't seem the least bit concerned about them and told them, "I may be a monk, but I have no interest in saving people." The men blinked as that Zoro said, "I was just wondering if I could get in on this. I haven't had anything to eat or drink for 3 days. At this rate, I'll soon be too weak to earn any money." "We sure that's not you, bro?" Frankie asked, thinking that sounded just like something that their Zoro would have said. "I'm telling you that's not me," Zoro yelled, glaring right back at the figures. "Luffy was sent flying off, wasn't he? So how is it that we're seeing this now?" No one could answer him as the man who had the most makeup on his face walked forward, having had enough of this talking, and grabbed him by the front of his kimono. "Get lost, you shitty monk," he yelled, but the monk just casually tripped him up with his staff and knocked him into the water. "Oops," he said with a sinister smile, "my mistake. My hand slipped." "Well, at least he's not some weakling," Current Zoro said, watching his imposter go to town on these guys. Despite the fact that he didn't use swords like the real Zoro did, he was really good. The monk easily took them all out with his staff, and didn't even seem to be breaking a sweat.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
Soon, all the men were on the ground and moaning in pain, some even half drowned in the river behind them. But that was when they heard another voice speak up. Hey, you're not too bad. They turned at once because they knew that voice anywhere. And they were right. It was Luffy coming towards them, but they blinked when they got a good look at the attire that he was wearing and who was with him. Usopp was standing at his side, but they were both dressed in clothing that none of them had ever seen before. Usopp was standing there, holding up a lantern, and he was dressed in such a way that he looked like a green ninja. There were plated armor covering his arms and his legs, as well as some kind of jute hanging from his belt. As for Luffy, he had like a full, light armor underneath a short, red kimono. He still wore sandals on his feet, and his straw hat was hanging by a string around his neck, and his hair had some kind of topknot at the back of his head. That's a Chanmage, Zoro said, recognizing it at once. But what the hell? I don't remember ever wearing anything like that before. Usopp cried out, his jaw falling open. I don't remember any of this. What's going on? The muggers suddenly freaked out at the sight of the two of them, and they all staggered away as quickly as they could, as if afraid that they'd be arrested if they stayed any longer. Yet as they left, one of the men pulled himself out of the water, shouted back, "This isn't over yet." And that was when they disappeared into the night. Okay, Brook whispered, "What?" "That pretty sums up what I'm thinking here," Chopper whispered, wondering just what this was about. "Okay, so neither of you remember this." Nami pressed them, as if hoping that if she asked, they'd suddenly tell her what this was about. But both men shook their heads, completely lost to this whole thing before the monk. Zoro sighed in disappointment. "What a waste of energy," he said as he turned and jumped over to one of the logs, before heading to the boat that he had been sleeping in before. The other Usopp ran over to the woman who was still on the ground, but his attention was mostly focused on the backs of the men who were still running for the hills. "I feel like I've seen those guys before," he whispered worriedly. "I wish I could say the same thing," the real Usopp said, his eyes holding little dizzy marks, as if all this thinking was driving him crazy. "I don't get it at all." Luffy stepped forward, his hands in his sleeves, as he looked to the girl on the ground. "Oi," he said to her, "are you okay?" The girl barely glanced up at him as she pushed herself up to her knees and muttered a quick yes, trying to get up. But when she tried, she stumbled and fell, having to clutch her arm tightly. Their Chopper gasped and ran over to see how bad the injury was, as Usopp was asking what the problem was before he saw the blood. "Is it serious, Chopper?" Sanji asked quickly, but Chopper frowned, unable to see anything in this low light. "I can't tell," he confessed, "but she's bleeding a lot. She needs that wound to be properly treated." "Damn it," Sanji growled, furious that anyone could hurt a lady like that. He then rounded on Zoro and yelled, "What's with you? Why didn't you help her? What was that about asking for a job? You idiot." "That's not me," Zoro yelled back, but he never took his eyes off the monk, who had picked up a bundle from the boat and was tying it to his back. He wasn't the only one either. Luffy was watching him in great interest as the monk Zoro jumped back to shore and walked away from them. But they were all given a surprise when the other Usopp stood up, his weapon drawn and yelling that they needed to bring him in for questioning. "Questioning?" Frankie repeated, several question marks hanging over his head. "Who are you? Some kind of policeman?" I don't." Usopp croaked out, completely lost to this whole thing. "Question me?" Monk Zoro asked, barely glancing back as Usopp held his weapon up a little higher. "That's right," he yelled, "you're a suspect. You're the one who inflicted those wounds. Surrender yourself. You're making it sound like you don't even know him, Usopp," Nami whispered, staring around at them all. But Luffy jumped to Monk Zoro's defense. "It wasn't him, Usopp," he said, walking forward and smile on his face. "See, those wounds were made with swords. I doubt someone like him would be sloppy missing his mark." "Well, that's true," the real Zoro whispered as his monk counterpart tilted his hat up a little so that they could clearly see his face. It was him without a doubt, and he gave a satisfied smirk at Luffy before he held up staffed hand in farewell. "See you around, Chief Straw Hat." "Chief," they all repeated in bewilderment. "Since when do you call Luffy-san Straw Hat?" Brook began. "Don't say a word," Zoro growled. "Okay, bye," Luffy called before he blinked in surprise. "Wait, how does he know who I am?" "What do you mean how do I know who you are?" The real Zoro yelled at him. "It's like you guys weren't even friends here." Nami croaked out as Robin frowned in thought. But that was when the other Usopp got their attention by talking to the woman, who had gotten to her feet and was staggering away. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" he called to her. "No," Chopper gasped, "she shouldn't be moving. She needs to see a doctor." His words were proven to be true when she collapsed and fell to the ground, knocking her hat off. And when they got closer, they got a good look at her face. It was Vivi. Vivi. Most of the Straw Hats gasped at the sight of her here. "Vivi, my dear Vivi was hurt," Sanji yelled out, his eyes full of fury at the thought of not being there to protect her. "That does it. Those bastards are dead." "Chief, it's a girl," Usopp called. "What do we do? A girl? How can I not know her?" The real Usopp yelled out. Sure, it had been a long time since he had seen her, but how could he so easily forget about Vivi? Would someone just give him a clue as to what was happening here? "I think that Blue Nose Sensei is still at the pinwheel," Luffy said, "let's take her there." "Blue Nose Sensei," Chopper whispered, his hoof going to his blue nose. Is he talking about me? What the hell is going on? Nami cried out, messing up her hair as she racked her brains over this. Everyone dressed in weird clothes, Zoro's a monk, no one recognizing each other, Vivi's here, and Chief Straw Hat. It's like I'm dreaming here or something, Frankie said, scratching the side of his face, and at his words, Robin's eyes opened up in realization. She suddenly started to chuckle, making them all jump and look at her. Oh, now I get it now, she laughed, this is all a dream. A dream? They asked her in bafflement as Luffy and the fake Usopp get on either side of Vivi and helped her to her feet, helping her to walk, and they began to follow after them, heading to a village of rather poor-looking houses. Robin only nodded as she told them, I remember now. After I was sent away, I fell into a deep sleep. And I had the strangest dream and all of you were in it. She then laughed more as she thought it over. I dreamt that we were all monsters. And she continued to laugh as she thought it over. She was the Gorgon Rodusa, who was forced to wear sunglasses because she would turn anyone who looked into her eyes to stone. Monsters? Chopper asked in amazement as she nodded, tears coming to her eyes at how she remembered how stupid the dream was. She remembered it all so well now. They were in the monster village called Monstown inside Monster Forest. Usopp was Usopaka the centaur, and he had fired an arrow so that it hit Luffy's hat, who was Lugyao the dragon. Usopaka was demanding that Lugyao hand over one of his legendary horns before Lugyao yelled at him for a moment before inviting him to help him fish for the legendary fish of the sea. That was when he pulled on the rod, and when he pulled up the line, Chopper, who was actually the Kraken Chopakin, had been pulled out, and it turned out that it hadn't been the first time that Lugyao had caught him. When he asked what he was doing at the bottom of the ocean, Chopakin explained that he was looking for the legendary treasure that was down there until he was distracted by the chocolate at the end of his fishing line. The rest of the dream went on to include characters such as the mermaid Stronomy, Nami, the Kappa Singara, Sanji, Zoramilk the Minotaur, Zoro. At one point, Rodusa appeared, looking angry at them all as she scolded them for looking for each other's treasures when they were all legendary creatures. Lugyao told her that the reason they were acting like that was because they all saw her crying when she lost her legendary earrings, so they wanted to replace them with something rarer and more special. As the others tried to tell him off for letting the secret slip, Robusa started to cry in happiness and embarrassment as she turned away from them, which caused her sunglasses to fall off. So when she turned back to thank them, she turned them all to stone. Robin was laughing the whole time as she added the rest of the dream went on with her turning them back from stone and all the other crazy adventures in Monstown, including meeting up with the Griffin Frankistern and the vampire Count Brocula after they were all awoken. Wow, Zoro said as they all looked at her, I never knew you had such an active imagination, Robin. And I was really a big kraken? Chopper asked, his eyes wide in amazement. Like Sarum, and my dear sweet Nami was a mermaid. Sanji gasped out, his nose bleeding at such a thought. And you were a dirty water imp, Zoro reminded him. Sanji's eyes narrowed as he yelled, and how is being a minotaur that looks like a cow any better? The two glared daggers at each other as Robin wiped the tears of laughter from her eyes. I know it's stupid, but that was a lot of fun dreaming that, she said, I can't believe I forgot until now. I personally think I should have been the centaur since I was the only one who could turn into one. Frankie stated, thinking that over. Please, Usopp said with a wave of his hands, your upper half was the one in the back. Centaurs are known for being great shots, and it only makes sense that I was the one who was a centaur. It was a dream, Robin reminded them as she finished laughing. I just had to tell you that because I am pretty sure that this is what it is. She looked around at Foreign Town. As insane as it sounded, it was the only thing that made sense to her. I think that this is all just the dream that Luffy had when he fell asleep after he was sent flying away from Sabayati. Have any of you had dreams like that when you were sent flying? They all looked at each other and realized that she was right. Each of them did have some very strange dreams. Yeah, I remember. Chopper cried out happily, his own fantastic dream coming back to him, though he wasn't sure where it had come from since he blacked out after going into his monster point. I dreamt I was a superhero called Chopper Man. And he then started to laugh when he told them all who they were all in his dream. He was the hero who could use fly around the world and had the weapon of cuteness to fight the enemy. Then there was Namifia, who was his assistant and was just as greedy as the real Nami was. What did you say? Nami yelled at him and the smile faded at the scary look on her face. Never mind that. Usopp said quickly, what about the rest of us, Chopper? Chopper then told them about Dr. Usotabata, who was based off of Usopp and even had a handlebar mustache and lived in an evil castle. The real Usopp burst out laughing at that idea and imagined what he would look like with a mustache. A grin spread across his face when he heard that he had several powerful servants at his control, but the grin faded when Chopper told him that none of them were really loyal to him. There was the giant Luffy bomber and the Fran Dasher robots doing battle, then there was the perverted monster Sanjirops that just looked like Sanji in a lizard suit.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
Zoro was some kind of monster known as the Onigiri Mystery Man, Zoro Killer, who loved rice balls. And lastly, Robin was roboflowing with 6 arms and was a warrior queen who never failed to fall for Chopperman's cuteness. I take it back, Zoro said, rubbing his head as the others laughed. You have the strangest imagination, Chopper. The point that we're making here is that I think that we all had very strange dreams as we fell into that sleep. Robin smiled, feeling better than she had for a long time. So I don't think that it's too strange that Luffy would dream something like this, right? I mean, that would explain everything, wouldn't it? I suppose, Nami said, thinking it over. Now that she thought of it, she dreamt of them playing a game of baseball against Arlong and his crew. Buggy and Bon Clay were the announcers, and there was even Gonfal there as the umpire. She smirked at how she thought of the brutal game of baseball before Luffy punched them a home run. Yeah, she supposed that anything can happen in a dream. At least Luffy didn't make her a monster or a secretary, at least she hoped not. They wandered some way into town until they came to a building that had a faint light shining on inside. Right beside the front door was a sign that had Nami's tattoo marked there, and she reached up to touch her shoulder to touch it in amazement. Was this place where her dream self lived? She got her answer at once when the two helped Vivi step inside, and they appeared to be in a tiny restaurant with Dream Nami, Chopper and even Sanji there, all talking and enjoying their dinner. Real Sanji let out an excited cry when he saw Dream Nami dressed in the pink kimono with white circles, and her hair done up with a pin at the back of her head. His dream self was drooling at the sight of Vivi, much as how the real one was doing at that moment. And he was dressed much like how Luffy was, only his clothes were blue instead of red, and he was carrying a long pipe in his hands as he smoked it. As for Dream Chopper, he was in a cream-colored kimono with a brown vest and striped pants, as well as wooden shoes on his feet. Wow, I look pretty damn good like that, Real Nami said, blinking in surprise as they all came towards the boys and helped to take Vivi to a room in the back where they could properly treat her. Thank you, Luffy, Sanji whispered to himself, staring at how cute that this Dream Nami was. It's a very interesting dream so far, Robin chuckled to herself as she watched Dream Chopper jump down from his seat and followed them into the back, giving them orders as to what to do. The boys all sat back and let Nami and Chopper do their work. They listened to them all talk, and they found out that this was indeed a restaurant that was called the Pinwheel. And Nami ran it as a waitress and Sanji was the cook, naturally. Of course we would be doing something with food, Real Nami whispered with a laugh. It is Luffy's dream after all. Yeah, and I'm a doctor here too, Chopper told them all happily. Blue Nose Sensei, I kinda like that, Brook laughed a little, wondering what he was going to be in this dream world. I think that you just have a new nickname, Chopper, Robin laughed, enjoying herself far more than she had for the last few memories. I quite like it, who knew Luffy had such an active imagination? Frankie laughed. Oh, I bet that I'm somebody badass. But Chief, what is he? A policeman. And Usopp's his partner. Really? Zoro asked in surprise. It's a dream, it doesn't have to make sense, Robin reminded him. I personally think that this is great. I, too, am enjoying it. Brook agreed at once. I wonder who else we will be seeing here. What do you think you are, Robin? Chopper asked her eagerly, and she chuckled. I'm not sure, Blue Nose Sensei, she confessed, but I am looking forward to seeing more here. Dream Sanji brought in the bedding after Dream Chopper left, leaving Nami some instructions on how to take care of Vivi before he said goodbye to all the others. As Dream Sanji set up the bed for Nami, Luffy and Usopp stuck their heads into the room as well, asking how she was doing. Dream Nami glanced up at them and told them that the wound wasn't serious and that she had just fallen asleep. She should be recovered by morning. Yeah, that's what I thought, Real Chopper said as he watched them. You do know that none of this is real though? Zoro asked him. It's the thought that counts, Robin smiled as Dream Sanji brought the bedding in so that Nami could be near Vivi in case she woke up, and Luffy and Usopp stuck their heads into the room, asking how she was doing. Vivi was sleeping peacefully and deeply, her arm having been bandaged up and her pale face had some color back. Dream Nami smiled up at them and told her what Dream Chopper said. That she would be just fine and should be up by some time tomorrow. All she needed now was some rest. They all looked at her sleeping face and both Sanji's side, the dream version whispering, such divine beauty. Fate must have brought her to me. I'm glad she's alright, Dream Usopp sighed, but I still don't get why she tried to run away though. If my suspicions are correct. But he didn't finish that sentence and that was where it ended. What on earth made yourself wonder why she wouldn't want to escape from those creeps? Nami demanded Usopp as the dream memory fading from their view. I mean, did they look like nice guys to you? It wasn't me, he retorted in embarrassment. This is Luffy's dream, I don't know why I said that. It's so funny how perfectly they have our personalities though, Robin said as she watched in enjoyment. But why are we seeing parts of a dream though? Chopper asked, having thought that they would be waking up on the island that Luffy had been sent to. If nothing else, it's entertaining. Brooke said happily, and I think I speak for each of us when I say that we needed something to laugh at after that last memory. No one disagreed with him there, and it did feel good to be able to see something so much more lighthearted than before. But it was a little strange not having any idea as to what was going to happen next. In the next memory, or dream memory, they should call it, they were walking through the town again. Only this time it was the middle of the day and the town was filled with people doing their shopping or simply enjoying the nice weather. As they looked through the crowds, they could see the faces of other people that they knew, such like people they've met from some of the many islands they visited together, and even some they remember from their home islands. It was all such a surreal moment that they didn't notice Luffy for a second before he spoke up with Dream Chopper. "Vivi?" he asked in surprise, "so her name's Vivi?" "Yeah, and the rest of us are weirdos too," Real Zoro stated. "Wait," Real Chopper said, looking up at him, "you mean you didn't have a dream like this too?" "No," Zoro said stubbornly, but they couldn't help but notice that he said that a little too quickly and they suspected that he was lying. "Yeah," Dream Chopper answered, and they looked back to see them walk past them. "But she only ever told us her name. She didn't want to say anything else, but she's completely recovered though." "Great," Luffy said brightly, "that's all that matters." "Yes, thank goodness," Sanji sighed, who went skipping along after them, wanting to see his sweet Vivi once again. "So, I've been meaning to ask," Frankie said, "the reason why some of us are characters, I guess, in this dream, does that mean that this is how Luffy sees us?" No one knew what to say to that for a moment. "Well, I can see Sanji running a restaurant," Robin answered, "and Chopper is still a doctor." "But I'm a monk," Zoro said, shaking his head and trying to make sense of that. "Yeah, but monks do tend to be loners," Robin reminded him, "they tend to mind their own business and help out when they see fit." "So that does sound like you. What about me though?" Usopp asked, and Luffy. "A policeman? In what life?" Robin only shrugged, unable to answer that. Just then they approached the pinwheel and stepped inside as they called for food. They got their first surprise when they saw Vivi there, cleaning the tables, and greeted them happily. Real Sanji drooled when he saw her dressed in the white kimono speckled with orange and blue, while his dream self was doing the same thing, running back and forth at how cute she was before he crashed into the wall. "Yep, this is us," Real Nami laughed, shaking her head. "I'm really liking this." She wanted to help out to show her gratitude, Dream Nami answered, stepping forward, "so I couldn't refuse." In other words, she got herself some free labor, Real Usopp whispered under his breath to Frankie and Brook, who nodded in agreement. "What was that?" Real Nami growled at them and they all froze. Nothing. They cried out together, and they were glad that Luffy asked Vivi if she was feeling alright now. "Yes," she smiled, "all thanks to Blue Nose Sensei. I've never felt better." At that, Dream Chopper turned red and began to tell her, "Shut up. It's not like I want your compliments, you jerk. This is just too perfect." Robin laughed and the Real Chopper was surprised to see how much his dream self acted like him. Dream Nami told Vivi to serve drinks and she did so without complaint, though it couldn't have been any clearer that she had never served tea a day in her life. She stood there with the tray of tea in her hands, glaring at it as she tried to walk, only to stumble and almost fell over. All the Real Straw Hats laughed at how innocent this was and Dream Nami asked what the problem was. That was when Vivi confessed that she had never served tea before, yet she did well until she almost got to the table. She tripped over her own feet and sent the hot tea splashing over Luffy and Dream Chopper, causing them to scream in pain. "You know, that really does seem like something Vivi would have done," Nami laughed as Dream Sanji came running out of the back with a worried expression on his face. But he went straight for Vivi, asking if she was hurt at all, which caused the two to yell at him for that. "Of course," Real Sanji proclaimed, "even in a dream, she's cute. She could have burnt her hands serving tea to you losers. I really don't like you," Usopp hissed as Dream Nami tried to calm everyone down by telling Sanji to go and make some food. Soon enough, Sanji had come up with a delicious-looking tray of food and passed it to Vivi. She was glaring at the tray much like she did with the tea, and this time, Dream Nami looked worried. But Vivi insisted on it, determined to get it to the table, and she was able to do so without even stumbling. As the two looked down at the food eagerly, Dream Chopper pointed out how the fish was still struggling to breathe despite the fact that it was hacked into pieces. "Well, at least you know it's fresh," Real Frankie pointed out. "Really fresh," Zoro stated as Vivi's face turned blue at the sight of it and she screamed as she threw the tray from her, this time covering them in food. "You think that she'd never see a fish before," Usopp whispered as Real Sanji sighed. "She didn't have to waste it," Sanji sighed. "Even if it is part of our captain's freaky brain. People serving him food, though," Usopp pointed out, suddenly hungry for some of that food as well. "That sounds like Luffy's perfect dream world." And the dream went on, giving them all a lot to laugh about as the restaurant opened and a lot of customers came in, meant to see Vivi. And they heard everyone say that they knew they didn't stand a chance with Dream Nami because she only loved money. The Real Nami's eyes narrowed, wanting to have a few good words with Luffy for that, but secretly knew that it was true. But here, she was looking around at the booming business and was even starting to come up with a few backup ideas in case being a pirate didn't work out. At least until Dream Sanji saw them all goggling at Vivi and kicked them out so that the places was empty. "How could you do something so stupid?" Real Nami yelled at Sanji and gave him a punch to the head. "How can there be any money coming in if there aren't any customers?" "It's a dream," he yelled back, "besides, I'm with my dream self here." He had to do something to protect Vivi-san. "Not to self," Nami whispered, running a hand through her long hair. Never run a restaurant with Sanji, or if I do, make sure he stays in the back. Those creeps aren't gonna be back here anytime soon. Dream Sanji proclaimed proudly, you're saved now, Vivi-san. Dream Nami, who was sulking on the ground, glared up at Sanji and yelled out, how are we supposed to stay in business without customers? Without waiting for an answer, she covered her face again and cried. I guess this place is doomed to fail after all. Okay, now this is strange, Real Nami said as they all laughed at how close their talk had been. Yo-ho-ho-ho. Luffy-san certainly does know us well, doesn't he? Brook asked, strumming up his guitar. I should write a song about all of this. I'm so sorry, Nami-san. Vivi tried to apologize, I went too far. What's she apologizing for? Real Nami asked with a roll of her eyes. I mean, it was because of her that the place was doing so well. Her dream self seemed to think the same thing as she waved a hand at her and told her that it was okay since it wasn't her fault. Yeah, don't worry. Luffy called happily, with him and Dream Chopper the only ones who hadn't been kicked out by Sanji's rampage. And he was busy eating all the leftovers that everyone left behind in their hurry to leave. You know, this reminds me fondly of the good old days when I used to kick the crap out of people back at the Barati, Real Sanji said, thinking back. Only now, I don't have that old geezer kicking me every other day. That's a nice change. Luffy was just about to scarf down a mostly eaten fish before he seemed to remember something. Oh crap, he said as he got up, I forgot something important. I gotta go. And he gathered up all the food that was still on the table and stuffed it all into his mouth before he turned to Vivi and invited her to come along with him. Somewhere important? Zoro asked, his eyebrows raised. Should I be concerned? No, something tells me that it's not that bad, Usopp told him. Vivi looked surprised by the invitation and seemed to hesitate for a moment. But Dream Nami sighed, saying that the only thing important for Luffy was goofing around and told Vivi that since their customers were scared away, she could go as well. Without waiting for an answer, Luffy happily grabbed her hand and pulled her out the door and through the town. So now where are we going? Chopper asked curiously, a little sad that his dream self said that he couldn't come with them. Vivi was clearly wondering the same thing and called out that question as Luffy continued to pull her along. To play, he laughed. We're going to play, she asked in surprise, as if she had never heard of such a thing before. Where? Just come on, he yelled back, just smiling back in an answer. I said it'll be fun. He promised as he then led her down an alley, calling for everyone to get out of the way. They were all wondering the same thing, but as they ran, the real Sanji stopped dead, almost causing the ones behind him to trip up. Damn it, Cook, what the hell? Zoro yelled, but he ignored him as Sanji cried out in joy at the sight of her. Dream Robin finally made her appearance. She was in the shadows of one of the buildings, dressed in a beautiful green kimono with red and yellow patterns, and carrying a long reed in her hands. Oh, Robin, you look gorgeous. Sanji sighed lovingly and Robin folded her arms, smiling at her dream self as she watched the two go running by. Looks like I found her. My, how troublesome you've been, she heard her dream self whisper to herself before the dream memory disappeared around them. Wonder what that was about, Real Robin said to herself, wondering just what her role was in all this. In any case, she was eager to see more. And when the next dream memory appeared, they found out just what this important play date was all about. Usopp let out a cry of excitement when he saw his old crew, Pepper, Carrot, and Onion. And also there was Rika there, whom Zoro blinked in great surprise, and each one of them was wearing the same kind of attire. Rika was dressed in a striped kimono of brown and yellow, with each of the boys wearing much the same thing. But with Pepper he was wearing a dark green, Carrot a darker shade of red, and Onion was in a light brown and a blue vest. Ah, Nami-kun, they look so cute like that. It's gorgeous here, Robin commented, and they looked up to see for the first time that they had met the kids at a stone bridge right over a small river, where there were beautiful cherry blossom trees all around them. So pretty, Nami gasped as Chopper's eyes shone. Kinda makes me wanna have a party when I looked at these petals, Frankie commented. Yo-ho-ho-ho, sounds like a marvelous idea. I shall provide the music. Brook cheered on as the dream characters were starting to fish. Check it out, Vivi. Luffy said happily as he picked up a fishing rod and threw the line out into the river. I'm gonna catch a real lunker. So don't get grossed out again. Vivi gave him an angry look and they all sniggered at how she freaked out at the sight of that fish. I'm fine now, she snapped at him. I know you are, Vivi dear. Sanji sighed dreamily. You don't need to worry. Pepper chirped up, looking at her with a knowing smile. He's not actually gonna catch a fish. Yeah, he can't catch anything. Carrot laughed. Shut up. Luffy frowned at him before he looked at the water with a determined expression on his face. Just watch. The only times he ever catches anything is when we can't eat them, Sanji whispered, thinking of that one time he brought up that giant snail with the salesman inside it. It was through fishing that he caught that stone half that sent us here, right? Zoro asked them and they seemed to remember that. Yeah, Chopper added as Vivi asked Rika what they were talking about and Rika told her that it was true that Luffy never caught a single fish. I remember him showing it to me. Why didn't you tell us about it? Sanji demanded. We did, Chopper recoiled, but you said that if we couldn't eat it, then we didn't need it. Sanji blinked for a moment before he smacked himself in the face, silently telling himself to pay more attention to things like this. In the dream, however, no sooner had Rika finished telling Vivi about Luffy's inability to catch anything, the little bauble disappeared under the water and Luffy excitedly pulled on the pole. At least until he brought up an old and broken cart that got everyone in the dream and outside to start laughing. Not even in his dreams can he catch a fish. Frankie laughed. The poor bastard. He really did catch a lunker. Onion burst out laughing, tears of laughter in his eyes as Pepper added, his first on ever. And that just caused another round of laughter for them all as Luffy frowned at it, as if blaming the cart for never being able to catch something. Even Vivi wasn't able to hold back her laughter at the sight of it. Damn, and I thought I had something too. Luffy pouted and stood up before he turned to Vivi and offered her the chance to fish. I wonder if I'll be any good. She asked and excitedly took the pull, but her eagerness faded when they pulled out the basket of worms and she backed away at once. The fish eat those. She croaked out, her face full of disgust as she looked at the still wriggling worms. What's with her? Chopper asked, she'd never seen a worm before. Oh, I have a very good idea why, Robin answered, suddenly seeing where this was all going. And if I'm right, we'll find out soon. Chopper glanced at her questioningly, but Luffy was also looking at her with surprise on his face as he asked, huh? You mean you've never seen a worm before? Vivi sure doesn't know anything, does she? Carrot asked mockingly. She's even dumber than we are. Onion added and all three boys were laughing. Rude punks, Sanji snarled, wanting to beat some manners into them. Actually, that is a lot like how they would act, Usopp said, thinking back fondly to his childhood. Well, I blame you then for that. Sanji snapped, I don't care if they are kids. No one should ever be rude to a lady. You hear me? Even if this is all a dream, it doesn't mean that you can't have manners. Vivi gave them a put-out look. That is pretty weird, Luffy admitted before he turned to the boys and added with a hint of laughter in his face, but you guys don't have to put it like that. Vivi frowned and seemed to just blurt out without thinking, the carp bait up at the castle is nothing like that. At her words, they were all staring at her with wide eyes, like she was suddenly speaking a different language. The castle, they all repeated, and Vivi looked furious with herself for saying that and instead changed the subject quickly, asking them how fishing worked. At the question, Luffy immediately forgot all about the slip-up and soon they were all showing her how to bait a hook. I don't get it, Usopp whispered to himself. Robin was chuckling as Nami stated, almost fondly, Vivi had a bad habit of blurting things out like that whenever she got upset. But why would she bring up the castle? Brook asked curiously. I would have thought that it was obvious. Robin smiled at them as they watched the happy group throw their lines out and Luffy pulled up an old, broken sandal, which caused everyone to laugh again. I think that Vivi here is hiding a few secrets. And if I'm right, then it's certainly something that the real Vivi would do. What are you talking about? Zoro asked, but she merely smiled back as they watched. They were quite contented with watching them enjoy themselves, and occasionally laughed as Luffy caught everything except fish. It went on for what felt like hours, but they never complained when they saw them all laughing and having a grand time. Even if it was all just a dream, it was a good one. At long last, as the sun was starting to set, Rika left with the boys, waving goodbye to them all, with Rika calling to Vivi that she should come back next time. Okay, Vivi promised, waving back at them happily. See you soon. Take care. I wonder how Vivi's been doing these last 2 years, Chopper said, watching the big smile on her face. I hope she's alright. She's tough, she'll be fine, Nami said confidently. She glanced back at Robin and asked, you've been looking up on Alabasta, right? Yes, Robin admitted, and from what I've heard, it's pretty much rebuilt since the Civil War. It's grown to be very prosperous and has flourished. Oh, good, Usopp said in relief. Sounds like Vivi's making sure that they're getting work done, Nami said proudly. Good for her. Yeah, hopefully they won't waste all the work that we put into making sure that Crocodile's plans went up in smoke, Zoro stated when he suddenly noticed something. Through a cluster of trees, someone was coming towards them and he was mildly surprised to see who it was. His dream self had just appeared and was standing at the foot of the bridge, looking up at them before they noticed that he was there. I'm sorry, but I can't get over seeing you like that, Zoro, Frankie said, shaking his head. Well, I doubt that you're gonna look any better, Zoro said firmly as Luffy glanced down. Hey, it's that monk guy from before. Luffy said happily. I have no grudge against you, Dream Zoro said, but I have a debt to repay. Don't take it personally. He then tilted his hat up so that he could grin at them and they didn't like that at all. Huh, Luffy asked predictably. What are you talking about? That's what I wanna know, Sanji said, his eyes narrowing at the real Zoro next to him. Don't ask me, Zoro retorted, but even he felt a twinge of uneasiness inside him. Why was he looking at them like he wanted to chop them up? But almost as soon as Luffy finished asking the question, several more guys appeared and they recognized them from the same men who had attacked Vivi before. Each one of them had their faces painted with white and had blue and red patterns over that. Is the circus in town or something? Frankie couldn't help but ask before he noticed one of the men step forward and he blinked. Hey, wait a minute. Isn't that the unicycle guy that tried to kill you before, bro? Yeah, and that's the stupid beast tamer that Cho bit. Chopper added, pointing to the man who was wearing a thick fur hat so that he looked like some kind of bear from the chest up. Oh, no, Nami groaned, don't tell me. But her worst fears were proven true. Standing right beside them was none other than Buggy the pirate clown. Only now, he looked more like a clown than ever before. The robes he was wearing were filled with every kind of pattern and color that you could think of, with his hair now long in a light pink color, and there was the white makeup on his face as well, with the only part of him that looked the same as when they saw him in the previous memories was his large red nose. You're with them now, Sanji demanded of their Zoro, talk about stabbing someone in the back. What part of a dream don't you get, moron? Zoro demanded, but he was worried here, did Luffy really see him like this? Someone who would work for someone as pathetic as Buggy. We meet again, Straw Hat. Buggy proclaimed, this is just a formality, but won't you accept a small end of the year present from us? He then clapped a hand on Dream Zoro's shoulder and added, a free trip to your grave. Wow, how nice of him, Frankie muttered sarcastically. Really, if this guy thought he was so tough then why did he always make others do the dirty work for him? Oh, it's you again, Buggy. Luffy asked, and Buggy looked ticked off at how blasé he was treating the situation. If you've got a problem with me, why don't you just fight me yourself? A captain who can't fight his own battles isn't much of a captain, Brook nodded. Really makes you wonder what morons would ever willingly join with Buggy, Usopp said, and he had to fight hard not to look at Nami. But as if she sensed that he was talking about her, she gave him a hard slap to the side of the head. Hey, I was just pretending, you idiot. She snapped, I had to get that reassure from him somehow. Don't flatter yourself, Buggy said, an evil grin on his ugly face. What I'm after is that girl behind you. Girl? Luffy asked before he looked back to see Vivi backing away fearfully. Those bastards are after my beloved Vivi. Sanji roared out furiously. Alright you damn clowns, you're gonna be nothing but black and blue by the time that I'm done with you freaks. And what are you gonna do? Usopp asked behind him, make faces at them that they can't see. 'Cause that's pretty much all you can do here. Fine, Sanji snarled, but if that stupid clown is still alive, next time I see him, then I'll kick his ass. If you want to stop me, you'll have to go through him first, you stupid bastard. Buggy declared and Dream Zoro charged so quickly that they almost missed it. But 1 second Dream Zoro was there, the next they felt the shockwave and looked to see that the two were on the bridge and the water was kicked up around them in a great wave. The fishing pole Luffy had clattered to the ground but he had his hand on his jute, holding Dream Zoro's arm back. I'm afraid he's right, Straw Hat, Dream Zoro said, and it sounded strange to hear him call him by his nickname. Damn, Luffy, the real Zoro said, suddenly ticked off. He was gonna have a long talk with Luffy after all this. Because if he really thought that he would sink so low as to ever work with someone like Buggy. I don't get it, Luffy frowned at him, what are you up to? I wonder. Dream Zoro asked as he smirked and quick as a flash, his hat and the cloth that he carried on his back went flying and they saw the flash of blades so that Luffy was forced to jump out of the way as Dream Zoro showed all 3 swords. Up in the air, Luffy looked down at him as the Dream Zoro jumped up to try and slice at him again, but Luffy stretched out his hands and grabbed a nearby branch to get out of the way. Luffy sat there, perched, as he looked down at him get into a fighting stance. Well, at least he got my fighting style right, the real Zoro muttered, his hands on his swords. Like hell he'd ever fight with anything else. Oh, you use 3 swords, huh? Luffy asked brightly. This'll be fun. And then he jumped, throwing out a Gatling gun to try and hit him with his weapon in hand. Dream Zoro batted them away easily as he jumped towards the clowns. Luffy landed and threw a punch, which caused Dream Zoro ducked and Luffy hit Buggy instead. As the men panicked over their boss, they saw Dream Zoro smirk and suddenly they realized what was going on. I get it. Robin laughed as Chopper looked up at her in confusion. Get what? So Zoro ducked and Luffy missed him. Why was everyone smirking? Well, in that case, I guess I can forgive him. The real Zoro smirked as his dream self bolted so that he was standing behind the rest of Buggy's minions, and was taunting Luffy. Oi, Straw Hat Luffy, what's with those lame punches? He called at him. Lame, Chopper asked, but Luffy was laughing now. He smirked as if he was suddenly in on the big secret. Take this then, he called and he held back for a fraction of a second until Dream Zoro stepped lightly out of the way and Luffy began to throw out dozens of punches at the same time so that he sent most of Buggy's men flying. See, the real Zoro said as his dream self continued to taunt Luffy again, this time a good distance away with the rest of Buggy's men between them. Even in a dream, I'd never stoop as low as to work for someone like Buggy. Chopper continued to blink in confusion until Robin noticed this and knelt down to him. See, he doesn't really want to fight Luffy like this. Instead, he's pretending to be on their side and letting Luffy take them all out, she told him. Oh, I get it now. He called in understanding. You go, Zoro. You bastard. Luffy called, but he looked close to laughing as Moji yelled at them to fight somewhere else, but too late. Luffy began punching them out once again, but as he did, they saw that Moji and his pet lion were heading over to where Vivi was standing. With everyone else's attention focused on not trying to get between the two, no one noticed at first. Sanji did, and with a battle cry, he charged out and stood protectively in front of her. He knew that there wasn't a point, but he had to do something here to protect her. He didn't have to worry, however. For it was Dream Zoro who noticed what was happening, and he sent a flying blade attack over at them so that they were blasted from the bridge and fell into the water. "Oops," he said, taking his sword out of his mouth, and speaking in a dull voice that fooled no one. "My hand slipped." That caused several of them to start laughing as Buggy's men finally seemed to realize what was going on. Unicycle Guy, Kabaji, pulled out his sword and ran at him, yelling out how outraged he was that he dared to trick them like that. "It doesn't sound like it was that hard," Usopp pointed out as the sword fight was over in a flash, and soon Kabaji was lying on the ground and out cold to boot. "See," Real Zoro stated, thinking about how that idiot tried to kill him back at Orange Town. "I could have taken him on easily if it wasn't for that cheap wound from before." "Quit making excuses," Sanji snapped at him, bitter that he couldn't have saved Vivi here. "Oops," Dream Zoro said again unconcerned, "it slipped again. You know, maybe we should try this tactic more often," Nami said, thinking it over, and was always up for a little deceit in battle. Not only that, but it was funny as hell to watch all of this. "Something to keep in mind then, Yohohoho," Brook said, really enjoying seeing what Luffy was dreaming about here. He would have to talk to him about all this once it was over. Vivi said, coming towards Dream Zoro. "Thank you very much. That's the second time you saved me," she told him, a small smile on her face and sincerity clearly in her voice. "Damn Luffy," Real Sanji yelled out, "why didn't you make me save her?" "No matter what happens, he can't seem to get a girl," Frankie whispered to Usopp, who nodded to him in agreement. It was rather sad to be honest. Luffy laughed as he watched, but it wasn't over just yet. "You rubber bastard," and they looked up in time to see that Buggy was standing there, fuming almost as much as the flaming torch in his hands, and a large cannon standing right next to him. "I'm flashily angry," he proclaimed, "I'm gonna blow you to hell, along with that deceitful mug." "I'd like to see him try," Real Zoro said, his expression just as disinterested as his dream self. "Huh?" Luffy asked, looking mildly surprised when he saw the mortar. "Where'd he get that cannon?" he seemed to ask himself. "Well, things do seem to have a habit of just appearing out of nowhere in dreams," Robin reasoned. "Die flashily," Buggy screamed, but to their surprise, a hand grew out of his chest and grabbed the torch. "That's you, Robin," Chopper called out excitedly, and Robin was looking around in interest, wondering where her dream self was. "Huh?" Buggy asked in confusion. You could almost see the question marks above his head, before he screamed, "What the hell?" But then the hand set fire to Buggy's lower body and Buggy whispered, "Oh, that's really hot." "Ya think?" Nami sighed, nodding in understanding. Yep, Buggy was just as much of an idiot in a dream than in real life. She tipped her hat off to Luffy for that. When Buggy finally seemed to realize he was on fire and went running for the river and jumped in. Everything after that was just as pathetic as well. Once Buggy's men had fished their boss out of the water, they seemed to have had enough for today and they just limped away from the group, trying to salvage what little dignity they had left, which was none. "What just happened?" Luffy asked, sweat drop hanging around his head, and the current straw hats. "There," Usopp called, having finally spotted her. Dream Robin was sitting comfortably up on a branch in the cherry blossom tree. She smiled and waved down at them all, her eyes trailing a little on Vivi, who was suddenly looking like a young child who knew that she had been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. But before they could really begin to understand what was going on, they heard another familiar voice call from the distance, "There they are." Glancing up, they saw that Dream Usopp, Nami, Sanji, and Chopper were all running towards them. "Sure," Real Sanji hissed bitterly. "I come in after the danger is over. How's that any different than what usually happens?" Real Zoro asked with a smirk, and you could almost hear the growl from Sanji's throat as he glared at him. "Vivi," Dream Nami yelled, a look of relief on her face when she saw her new friend all right. "There she is, Vivi," Dream Chopper gasped, panting as he struggled to keep up with the others, and of course Dream Sanji was swooning out words of love when he saw her. Luffy glanced up, mildly surprised that they had all come here, and was asking what was going on. "Boss, that girl's an imposter," Dream Usopp yelled, and he pulled out a wanted poster, proving that the authorities were looking for her. He began to accuse her of lying to them, and that he was right about her all along, at least until Dream Sanji appeared behind him, looking ready to break him in half. They got their unanswered questions soon afterwards though. For at that moment, Agaram had showed up with Chaka and Pell, along with a whole battalion of men right behind them. They had found out the truth, that Vivi was actually their missing princess and had left the castle secretly because she wanted to see what life was like outside the castle walls, and the dream faded when Agaram hit Luffy and Dream Chopper over the head to get them to unhand Vivi. "Huh," Nami said, thinking it over, "you know. That does sound like something Vivi would do if it really been her." I once heard a saying from somewhere, Robin stated with amusement, dreams show us our true selves. Well, I guess we know that it's true, don't we? It's so weird, Usopp muttered, but at the same time I see it. I mean, if this really was reality, I can totally see us all here like this. Man, this makes the dream I had look really stupid. What did you dream about, Usopp? Chopper asked curiously, and Usopp's face fell as he thought it over. He dreamt that he was in the Usoglia circus, first of all, and in the end he was stuck on a trapeze as a fire spread. Nothing important, he muttered in embarrassment, and he was spared having to answer any more questions when the dream memory came back up and they were standing at the foot of the castle. At least they assumed it was an enormous fortress with large walls and towers with thatched roofs and wooden shingles. It looked like it could have fit everyone from town inside the walls. Speaking of which, it really did look like every single person from the city was there, standing outside the front gate, and seemed to be eagerly waiting for something. As they were trying to find Luffy or one of their dream selves in the crowd, it was Sanji who had spotted 3 familiar figures not far away, and he stared. It was Patty from the Bharati, and he was running a food cart, waving over 2 other familiar figures. Canis! He cried out joyfully, and he went skipping over to them, and the others all turned to see him bolting. Where's that idiot going now? Zoro asked in annoyance as they followed, but they saw what had gotten his attention when they drew near. Sanji was drooling over the sight of Canis standing there as they struck up a conversation with Patty. Just when I thought I couldn't get any better, Sanji sighed blissfully. Nami and Robin, and then Vivi, now Canis. Oh, I'm in heaven. He really is a lovesick idiot, isn't he? Zoro thought, shaking his head in an almost piteous way. So just what is this lottery that they keep talking about? Pagaya asked curiously, and Nami's ears picked up at the word, lottery. Yeah, everyone here seems so excited, Canis said with a smile. It must be something important for us all to come here. That's because today is one of the town's grandest events. Patty told them. The New Year's big rice cake tossing. Rice cake tossing? The Straw Hats asked in confusion. That's right, Patty went on, unknowingly answering their question. If you live around here, you drop everything to be a part of it. The Lord tosses them out every year, and the scramble can get pretty rough if you ask me. Seems like a lot of trouble just for some rice cakes, Canis commented. Yeah, I mean, rice cakes are good and everything, Frankie said, thinking it over, but what's so big about them? And what's this about a lottery? Nami asked quickly. Oh, it's not like that, Patty laughed. No one really cares about the normal rice cakes, it's the jackpot one that everyone's hoping to get. The jackpot one, Canis, her father, and Nami all said together. That's right, Patty said, like he was some big announcer. While tens of thousands of rice cakes will be tossed out from the top of the castle, only one holds the jackpot. Inside this special rice cake there's a huge diamond that's said to be worth more than 10 million berries. At the mention of such a diamond, Nami's eyes turned to berry marks, and she was drooling at the thought of the diamond almost as much as Sanji was as he looked at Canis. That sure sounds like one hell of a prize, Frankie whistled. Think of all the cola I could buy with that. Yo-ho-ho-ho, sure sounds like a grand reward. Brooke said as Chopper nodded excitedly, already thinking of some of the books that he'd get if he had that kind of money. Too bad that diamond only exists in Luffy's dreams, Zoro reminded them, and you could see the disappointment in all of their faces, as if they had been denied the biggest payoff they ever had. A girl can dream, Nami whimpered, her head falling forward so that she was as limp as a cooked noodle. Great, now she was going to be dreaming of that diamond now. Amazing, right? Patty asked his customers excitedly. I sure like to get my hands on something like that. Just think, you'll be set for years. And he'd need that too, Sanji stated darkly, because he's a terrible cook. No doubt about that, Pagaya said, it would be incredible. But, how are you supposed to tell the difference between the regular rice cakes and the jackpot rice cake? Beats me, Patty confessed before he looked over his shoulder and spotted someone at another food cart. Hey buddy, do you know? They looked to see who he was talking to, and this time it was Chopper who was taken aback. Dalton, this is just like one big reunion in some strange, twisted way, Usopp whispered. I know, Robin agreed, I kinda like it though. No, Dalton called back to Patty politely, not a clue. I guess you just have to grab as many as possible and hope you get lucky, Patty finally answered as he turned back to the two. I see, Pagaya said, a little wistfully. Sounds like trying to catch a cloud if you ask me. If it's food, we'll find that thing easy, Nami whispered, thinking of Luffy, but not just him. They've had the rest of the boys here and they could eat enough to fill an army. Damn, if only this event was real. Hey, called Usopp's voice, and they looked to him, only to see that he hadn't said anything. He just shook his head in confusion, before he pointed over their heads to see his dream self having just come over to talk with Dalton. Looks like you opened up early, he commented. Dalton only chuckled and told him that he had made a special rice porridge just for today. No fair, Usopp, yelled Luffy's voice, and they jumped as they looked up to the tower where Luffy was sitting. How come you get to eat? I wanna eat too. If he had a choice between food and money, he'll go with the food any day, wouldn't he? Nami demanded darkly. No wonder we're always broke. Dream Usopp had a steaming bowl in his hands and was looking smugly up at him. "'Fraid you can't," he called tauntingly up at Luffy, "you have to stay up there and keep watch. Besides, this is porridge. If I just throw it up to you it'll make a mess," and he suddenly screamed for Robin's arms began to grow right out of his hands and lifted the bowl right up. "Didn't see that coming," Zoro blinked in mild surprise. "There you are Robin-san," Brook said, having spotted her. They looked to see where he was pointing and saw that Dream Robin was leaning behind a tree, silently helping out and only smiled back when Usopp spotted her. He even stuck his tongue out at her as she chuckled and left with a friendly wave of her hand. "Ooh," Luffy called once he took the bowl. "Special delivery. Thanks. Fine, whatever." Dream Usopp yelled up, looking put out, "Just promise that once you're done you go back to the front entrance and keep watch." He then added softly to himself, "Lazy jerk." "Oh, this is just too good," Robin chuckled. "You know, I'm starting to wonder that maybe this all happened in another life." "It's just so real," Sanji agreed. "And if I didn't know better, I'd agree." Maybe that was why Luffy tended to get carried away with his emotions sometimes. Because his imagination was so lifelike. But Dalton took pity on Dream Usopp and gave him another bowl of porridge. "Here," he said kindly, "you must be busy." Dream Usopp took it gratefully. "Yeah," he answered, "we gotta guard the 10 million berry jackpot rice cake ya know. With something that valuable up for grabs, I wouldn't be surprised if someone blinded by greed would be trying to steal it." It took everything that the Straw Hats had not to look at Nami when they heard those words. Because they knew that if they looked, she'll kill them. Nami had a tongue that could strip the scales off a fish at 40 paces, and a fist that was just as ruthless. Luffy had inhaled his food like he always did before he jumped down to the lower rooftops. They followed lightly behind him as he sat on the roof of the outer wall and was frowning heavily as he looked around for something. What he was waiting for was soon clear however. Coming up the steep road were the dream counterparts of Sanji, Nami, and Chopper. They were running as fast as they could go, with a cart and a tarp covering large bags that could only be the rice cakes. "Oh, real," Nami whispered as she thought it over. "That makes sense. If Vivi's the princess here then she'd trust us to make all the rice cakes, which means..." Her eyes shone like berry marks once again. "It would be good to have royalty clientele, wouldn't it?" "Ah," they heard Luffy say, and he looked like he could hardly contain his joy at the thought of the rice cakes. "There they are. What took them so long? Rice cakes taste best when they're just made, ya know." But then something strange covered their view, and when they looked hard at it, they saw that it was a large kite slowly drifting from the trees and right over the cart. "A kite," Luffy repeated. "That's pretty weird. Everything about this place is weird, bro," Frankie stated, folding his arms before he laughed. "But that's what I love about it." And things only got weirder when several hooks fell from the kite and hooked right up onto the cart at all four angles until it was lifted up into the air. Their dream selves didn't notice it until they were off the ground, with Dream Nami and Chopper screaming in terror. "What's going on?" Dream Sanji yelled, forced to hang onto the front part of the cart to keep himself from falling back down. "Why are we floating?" Chopper screamed out, clinging tightly to the back with that death grip, something they hadn't seen since he passed out clinging onto Zoro's face when Aqua Laguna almost drowned them. "This I got to see," Frankie said, jogging forward the short distance so that he could see for himself, and the others all followed after him, wanting to know what was happening now. And when they got underneath the cart and looked up, Chopper let out a cry of recognition. "Hachi!" Nami gasped. And it was true, he looked much more like the Hachi that they had seen at Sabayati than the one from Arlong Park. He had a rather friendly look on his face, and they couldn't see any trace of anything but mischief in his eyes. "What's happening here?" Brook gasped in confusion. "If I had to guess, I'd say that they were after the diamond," Usopp said, glancing up at the cart. "It's inside a rice cake, right?" "So, I doubt that it's on the cart though," Zoro stated, privately thinking that if they did have the diamond, Nami would have stolen in faster than blinking. "I agree," Robin stated, though it was unsure if she was thinking for the same reasons that Zoro had guessed. It would be rather reckless to have transported the diamond like this in case it got stolen. "If I had to guess, I'd say that it'd be somewhere inside the castle." "Doesn't mean that people can't try to grab it," Usopp said as Dream Nami glared up at Hachi, whose feet and his top upper arms were holding onto the kite, while his other four arms had hold of the ropes. "Let me guess." Dream Nami screamed up at him. "You're another crony from the clown family, aren't you?" "Octolutely," he called back happily. I mean, absolutely. By order of Boss Buggy, I am ordered to apprehend all of your rice cakes." "Hi, my name is Hachi, it's very nice to meet you." At least his polite, Brook offered. "Call me crazy, but kidnapping someone for their rice cakes doesn't sound so polite to me," real Sanji offered. And when he looked closer, he realized that the rope that was holding onto the kite led into the trees where someone else was waiting. "Spanda," Frankie hissed, having hoped to have never seen that idiot again. "Now, I know that it's supposed to be Gadatsui here, but since Luffy never met him, I don't think that it would have worked. So I'm using someone who was just as stupid as he was." "Don't worry," Hachi went on reassuringly. "As long as you hand over those rice cakes without any trouble, no one will be harmed." "You have my word." You'll return to the ground safely. You gotta be kidding. Dream Nami screamed up at him. If we don't deliver these rice cakes to the castle, then our reputation will be completely ruined. I personally find that a reasonable trade, Brook said. If it came to a choice between his life and some rice cakes, he'll take his life any day. If you guys did your job right, then we wouldn't be here, Real Nami snapped at Sanji and Chopper. Why blame us? Chopper demanded hotly. If you guys had been keeping a closer eye out here, then we would have been hanging like that. She retorted. Now, since they had been repeating themselves over and over at how this was all just a dream, no one bothered to remind her this time. But her dream self was yelling at Dream Sanji to hurry up and do something here, but he shrugged helplessly, nothing else that he could do stuck like this, and Dream Chopper just cried out for help in the back. Hey, Hachi warned, don't move around so much. It won't be my fault if you all fall off. But they were saved, sorta. At that moment, Luffy came jumping in and began to tear up the kite so that he could jump on Hachi's back and yelled at him to surrender the rice cakes. But with the kite destroyed, they were falling back down to the ground and fast. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Warm Memories and Brotherly Bonds by RoseDragonWitch. That idiot, Usopp whispered, smacking himself in the face at the sight of it, and Real Chopper screamed out Luffy's name in fear. Luffy looked like he was about ready to perform some other attack to try and stop the falling, yet Hachi grabbed onto him. Either it was just trying to hold onto something, or to prevent him from doing something else stupid, was anyone's guess. But as they fell, the cart hit the ground with such force that the three who were taking care of it were sent flying off before the cart began to roll by down the hill. Luffy and Hachi both ended up going right over the edge and into the forest below them, dragging a screaming Spanda the whole way, who was too stupid to let go of the end of the rope. The rope entangled them in such a way that they were forced to hang from the branches like a massive spider web. But they were more focused on what was happening in front of them. As Dream Nami fell, Dream Sanji leapt into action, jumping up and elegantly catching her in his arms as Chopper fell and crashed hard on his head. Yet with their attention divided, they hadn't noticed that someone else was coming up from the bottom of the slope. You've got to be kidding me, Usopp whispered. Just when you thought this guy couldn't get any more pathetic, Real Sanji sighed, rubbing his head in annoyance. Really? What is with him? He's an idiot, that's what, Frankie offered with a causal shrug. Buggy was there with his precious cannon and he was forcing his men to carry them on their backs. Dream Sanji had gently but Nami down. There, he told her, everything's alright now. That depends on who you're talking about, Frankie said, watching the cart continue to head straight towards Buggy's greedy hands. Dream Nami obviously thought the same thing, for she yelled at Sanji, no, it's not. Look behind you. That bastard. As soon as Dream Sanji set her down on the ground, he went running down to try and get it. But Buggy was laughing smugly at the sight of it all, and just seeing him here gave them all a terrible headache. Well, would you look at that? Buggy demanded. The rice cakes are rolling right into my lap. That jackpot will be mine. You know, it's pretty pathetic that he has to resort to stealing rice cakes for money, Real Sanji said. Luffy, only you could make stealing your food a big crime. Though you have to admit that from what we've seen of Buggy, he would probably do something like this, Robin offered as something came shooting out from behind them, going straight through Usopp's stomach and making him yell in shock. It was a grappling hook, and when they looked back, they saw Agaram standing there, holding onto the other end of the rope, with Chaka and Pell on either side of him. Chaka, Pell, quick, grab that cart, Agaram yelled. Sir. They yelled and went running for the cart, quickly pulling it up and away from Buggy and his men. Buggy was furious by this and was yelling at his men to hurry up and give chase. How can they if they're carrying you and that stupid cannon? Real Zoro couldn't help but whisper as Buggy's men were struggling to hold the cannon up and were begging for a break, which he naturally yelled at them to shut up. He really should treat his men better than that, Brook said, and he'd be frowning if he had any lips. Yeah, especially since they're the only ones who will put up with him, Real Sanji nodded at once. Once the cart was in their hands, Agaram walked up to Nami, rolling up the rope and grappling hook so that he could greet her, and asked if she was alright, which she confirmed. Despite a few setbacks, she said, your order was delivered as promised. He nodded back in understanding. I appreciate your hard work, Agaram told her. Now about our payment, Dream Nami asked sweetly. We get it right away, don't we? We went through more trouble than expected on this one. That's for sure, the real Nami nodded in agreement. You know, your dream selves might have had an easier time bringing the rice cakes if you had asked for help from the castle, Robin offered. But then we wouldn't get paid as much. Nami retorted as if it was the most obvious thing. We made them and got them here on time, didn't we? Ah, yeah, Agaram said hesitantly, about that. Hey now, Dream Nami scolded. This is castle business. You can't put it on a tab. Princess Vivi said that she will bring the payment to your shop in person tomorrow, he informed her, wait until then. He then smiled and politely excused himself. Oh, Vivi, how I can't wait to see you again. Real Sanji sighed, hoping that they could see that next memory quickly. Vivi, Kanis, Robin, and Nami all looked so cute in those kimonos. Sounds good, Dream Nami called, waving happily as Agaram was following after the other guards. Tell Vivi she can visit anytime. Yet as she waved, Buggy and his men were heaving the heavy cannon up the hill. Dream Sanji got to his feet and looked ready to clobber them all, but surprising, it was Dream Nami who stopped him. "Don't worry about it, Sanji-kun," she told him, "let's just make our way over to the event site." He looked back at her in surprise before she added, "We handed them off. Let's just leave the rest to the staff up at the castle." "Yeah, we had better things to fry than Buggy," Real Nami said, wondering if she'd get a chance to see what this diamond looked like. Her dream self then went to the ledge and they looked down to see the three morons hanging from the trees. Dream Nami then hollered to Luffy that they were going to head to the castle now, and that if something happened to prevent them from throwing the rice cakes, then he'd be banned from their shop forever. "You know, you could have helped him up," Brook began as he looked over to see Luffy trying to throw Hachi off him. "Ah, he's fine," Nami said with a wave of her hand as their dream selves went walking up the slope and out of sight. "Besides, it's his dream. I'm sure that if he wanted to, he could have a big dinosaur or something come out and save him." It took Luffy several long minutes to disentangle himself from the rope, and to get Hachi to let go of him, before he rocketed up to solid ground before he looked around furiously. As if he was expecting a fight as soon as he got up there. But when he realized that he was alone, he went running off in the direction of the castle and was yelling out the words rice cakes over and over again before they followed him up onto the rooftops and ran alongside him. "He's making me hungry again," Usopp panted, wishing that he had some rice cakes now. "Geez, at this rate, when we throw that part I'm gonna have so much food to make," Sanji sighed as he thought of the long list of food that he already promised them. Good thing that rice cakes don't take that long to make. In the distance they heard the sounds of cannons being fired, and they knew that something blew up from the trails of smoke that were drifting up into the sky. "Looks like Buggy finally had a chance to use that cannon," Zoro muttered in annoyance. "Well, it would have been a shame to have brought it all the way up to the castle and not use it," Brook reasoned. "That's not a good thing," Nami scolded before she heard Dream Usopp's voice ring out over the noise. "We gotta stop them before they destroy any more of the castle." He panted with Dream Zoro right on his heels. But at Usopp's words, the monk turned and went running down a side alley and everyone but the real Zoro laughed. Knowing that even a dream version of Zoro got lost too. The real Zoro felt a muscle going in his head as Dream Usopp went on speaking, not realizing that his companion was suddenly AWOL. "I have a pretty good idea to where they're headed," he commented. "Come on, monk. I know a shortcut. We can cut them off if we hurry. So let's go." "Man, I really wish that he knew who he was talking to," real Usopp panted as he ran. "If my dream guy down had any idea." "Usopp, if you want to keep breathing, I suggest you shut up," Zoro growled, wishing that they would just get to the real memories instead of this crazy dream world. At his threat, Usopp covered his mouth and Chopper felt cold at the thought of what Zoro would have done to Usopp. Luffy, who was running ahead of Usopp, heard his words and looked back. "Oh, hey there Usopp," he called when he saw who it was. "Thought I heard you. Who were you talking to down there?" Dream Usopp glanced up to see who was talking. "Huh, oh, hey," Dream Usopp called. "Isn't it obvious? I'm talking too." But when he turned around and saw Zoro gone he cried out in shock, "What? Where did he go? When did this happen? Don't you have better things to worry about than that?" Real Zoro snapped. "But you get lost all the time, so it's nothing new huh, Moss head." Sanji taunted with a grin, and the two were now racing, glaring daggers at each other, as if wishing for nothing more than for the other to suddenly drop dead. Luffy, however, lost interest as he jumped to the houses on the other side of the road before he crouched down and stretched out his arms, ready to launch himself. "Either way, I'm going on ahead," he called back and rocketed right out of there. "See ya." "I hate it when he does this," Nami whispered as they were suddenly sent flying through the air and over the town. She looked down, and not for the first time was she impressed at this whole town. It was strangely beautiful in a way and wondered just how Luffy was able to think up a place like this. Luffy however ended up crashing right into the side of the castle wall, but popped right out as if he had hit a wall of pillows rather than stone. He was looking left and right, trying to figure out where it was he was supposed to go, but his guess was as good as theirs. They could see the traces of a fight haven broken out and destroyed sections of the castle. "I think it's safe to say we're in the right area," Chopper gulped, looking around anxiously, and wondering just what they were about to see now. "I doubt that he could have gotten too far," Zoro yawned in an unconcerned way as Luffy continued to run around in circles, but the castle seemed to be deserted, at least until they caught a break. Looking up at the tallest tower, through a window there was a bright red light glowing inside. "Where's that light from?" Chopper asked as Brook raised his hand, as if to shield his non-existent eyes from the light. "Buggy's nose," Zoro said at once, recognizing that glow anywhere. "Oh, you can't really mean that, right?" Frankie asked, trying to figure out if it was all just a joke. But at that moment, Luffy looked up at it as well. "Aha," he yelled out. "So that's where that big red-nosed jerk went." "You've got to be kidding me," Nami whispered, though she couldn't think of anything else that light couldn't come from. "You could probably see Buggy's nose from space." Luffy stretched out his arms and they watched as the memory faded slightly so that they were standing in a large room, and they guessed at the top of that tower. Buggy was standing there and was fuming at the empty box in his hands as Vivi, dressed in a gorgeous kimono that made Sanji almost faint in shock at the sight of seeing her. But Buggy's men had a knife to her throat and it was clear to what was happening. The clown family kidnapped Vivi and were now threatening them to get the diamond. Standing against the wall were none other than Cobra, Dream, Usopp and Agaram, with Cobra the only one who looked to be calm about this whole thing. "So Cobra's the lord here?" Chopper asked curiously. "Makes sense," Zoro stated. "I have to say, I rather have him ruling here than any damn noble from Goa." "Fair enough," Brook nodded, having grown fond of Cobra and Vivi from the Alabasta memories and looked forward to meeting them in person someday. He wondered if Vivi would let him see her panties if he asked nicely enough. Just then, through the floor, there was a bang and Luffy came shooting up inside and ready to join the fighting. Agaram let out a yell of rage and screamed at Luffy, "Hey! Be careful, quit breaking the castle, their princess is in danger," and all he can think of is the building. Frankie asked, knowing that this was all easily repairable. "Yeah, he thinks that when it comes to royalty, everything should be grand," Sanji offered, thinking back to how important he wanted things to look. "But there's no doubting his loyalty," Zoro offered, thinking of how he was willing to give his life for Vivi in Alabasta when he sailed off from Whiskey Peak, and was nearly blown up. They nodded as Luffy ignored him and yelled at Buggy, "Give it up, Big Nose. There's no way I'm letting you steal that jackpot. Like I said, it's empty." Buggy barked back, crushing the empty box. Like anyone in their right mind would give him anything, Usopp whispered to himself as he watched his dream self cautiously slip out of everyone's sight and was creeping over to where Vivi was still being held captive. "As I was saying," Cobra said calmly, as if nothing had interrupted him, and was politely discussing the matter with Buggy over dinner. "Outside that window are the citizens of this town. Citizens who look forward to this event all year. This tradition is held on their behalf to start the new year off with a new sense of hope. It's a chance to test their luck. The outcome is entirely up to fate." "Makes sense to me," Zoro shrugged in a casual way. "The opportunity to win must be given to everyone equally. Handing over the prize in advance is unfair and destroys that hope." "I think that's the whole point of Buggy wanting to steal it," real Usopp whispered lightly. "He didn't want to wait. You know, he could have just waited to see who would get the jackpot and then go after them," Sanji offered. "Would have been easier to deal with than palace guards and all that." Like Buggy would be clever enough to think of something like that, Nami sighed with a shake of her head, unable to believe that there was a time she couldn't take that loser out on her own. "If you truly want that jackpot, you'll have to go down there, wait for the tossing, and then test your luck just like everyone else." Cobra finished up and they all looked at each other with their eyebrows raised, as if they couldn't believe that anyone would believe that would happen. Agaram, however, was clapping at his words. "Just as we've come to expect from you, my lord. Splendid persuasion. I'm very impressed. You've got to be kidding me," real Usopp whispered as sweat drop hung around their heads again. Luffy, meanwhile, was looking baffled to everything that Cobra said before he asked, "Hey, lord. Can we get this going? If we don't hurry, Nami's gonna beat the crap out of me." "So it looks like you're Luffy's nightmare," Zoro said, and real Nami glared at him as Sanji was looking as if he had just mortally wounded him. "Nightmare? Having Nami in a dream is heaven." He bellowed out, "Why, I dream about my sweet Nami every night." "Exactly what about?" Nami yelled at him and he shut up at once, realizing that he just made a big mistake. Nami looked ready to start pounding him for some answers as Agaram grabbed Luffy by the scruff of his neck and glared at him. "Insolent fool. How dare you speak to our lord that way? Show some respect." "Good luck with that," real Usopp said knowingly as Sanji was stuttering to Nami that he only ever saw her as a beautiful maiden and nothing more than that. "Really, because I think it's sweet," Nami sighed tiredly. "Really?" Sanji gasped out, his heart's back in his eyes. "Well, usually I dream of you wearing a swimsuit and—" "I knew it," she yelled and gave him a hard punch to the head and knocked him to the ground. "He walked right into that one, didn't he?" real Usopp whispered and they all nodded at that. "Yo-ho-ho-ho, poor Sanji-san," Brook sighed, knowing better than to let anyone know about his lecherous dreams of women's panties. But Buggy threw the empty case to the floor, getting their attention. "Forget it. I don't need your useless prize. But I won't be made a fool of, understand?" "Little late for that," they all whispered to themselves, knowing that it was far too late for that. Buggy suddenly gave a wild grin, his eyes bloodshot and looking crazy. "I've thought of something even better than your jackpot, my lord," he said with a dark chuckle in his voice. "If I kill you, I wouldn't need that lousy jackpot of 10 million berries. I'll have everything in the entire country at the tip of my fingers. So now, since it's come to this, I'm gonna flashily blow you away." I guess he thought that if he believed hard enough, it'd come true. Robin offered. "Well, in that case, I guess that we should be lucky that he's got a poor imagination," Zoro shrugged. But since Buggy's entire focus was on the people in front of him, he didn't notice when Chaka and Pell showed up and silently helped Usopp free Vivi and tied up all of Buggy's men behind him. "Oh, this is gonna be good now," Frankie grinned, rubbing his hands together at what they were going to do now. "I can't wait to see the look on Buggy's face when he finally notices," real Usopp laughed as Chopper giggled next to him. Men. Buggy commanded. Yes sir. Pell and Chaka smirked as they stood back up, a bag full of rice cakes in their hands. Buggy laughed insanely. You'll regretting trying to make a mockery out of me. Prepare the special Buggy ball. Prepare yourselves. Well, they're loading the cannon, Robin offered as they watched the two shove the bag into the back of the cannon and were preparing themselves to fire it. Yeah, so he shouldn't have anything to complain about, Sanji sniggered, seeing just where this was all going to now. Sir, Pell said, unable to hold back the smile as they closed the back of the cannon and were lighting the fuse. The special Buggy ball is loaded and ready. But he was looking at Cobra when he said that, who smiled back and nodded as Agaram stared in terror at what was about to happen. Alrighty then, Buggy called out, clearly not noticing that something was wrong, or that the voice who just spoke didn't even belong to his crew. Blow them away. He's gonna regret that, Robin smiled, moving her sunglasses down so that she could see it all without being blinded. And they fired, with Luffy, Cobra, and Agaram were forced to duck as the wall behind them was blown apart. But through the smoke, they could see the rice cakes flying out and onto the excited crowd. They could hear the cries of joy coming from the people outside. The dumbfounded look on Buggy's face was enough to put them all into a state of laughter when he saw the cakes fall. He finally had the sense to turn around and see what was going on, and when he saw them there with his men all tied up, drool began to spit and fall from his mouth in outrage as he screamed, "You tricked me. You think?" Zoro smirked. Really, that guy was hopeless, wasn't he? The jackpot may or may not be among the ones we just shot out, Pell stated to Chaka conversationally, as if they didn't just fire a cannon through the wall. Well, he did say he didn't want it anymore, Chaka reasoned. Fair point, Frankie laughed. So there's no need to give him something he doesn't want anymore. You need to always be careful what you say, Robin chuckled as Buggy looked ready to choke. You smug punks. Buggy yelled at them, that was obviously a slip of the tongue. Didn't sound like it to me, Chopper pointed out. Don't listen to anything that a guy who looks like a clown tell you, Nami informed him patiently. But Luffy had already stretched out his arms and grabbed Buggy by his shoulders. You're in the way, he yelled, and with a great heave, he lifted him off his feet. Now get lost. And he tossed him straight up into the air and went breaking right through the roof. Thank you for your hard work. Buggy yelled and he was gone. Well, that was funny, Brooke said as the rest of them felt a bit of a letdown at seeing it all end so quickly. Though that wasn't a surprise considering that it was Buggy. As for Luffy, he didn't stick around any longer as he grabbed Dream Usopp and jumped out one of the giant holes to join the horde going on below them. They laughed, and even real Usopp chuckled at the sight of his dream self screaming as they fell to the ground. But thankfully the fall was over quickly and Luffy went straight out to catching the rice cakes. He was catching them almost as quickly as he was stuffing them in his mouth and swallowing them. Pell and Chaka were on the roof and throwing out the bags of rice cakes that they hadn't fired out yet, and the scramble was on more than ever. You're being a little too greedy there, aren't you, boss? Dream Usopp demanded as Luffy happily stretched his mouth out so that he could catch dozens of rice cakes at a time. Well, you can't ask for someone who loves food more than him, Nami said, her eyes out for that diamond, wondering just what a diamond worth 10 million looked like to Luffy. She spotted her dream self not too far away and was furiously looking through each rice cake she could get her hands on. She ripped them open, and when she saw that there wasn't anything in there, she went for the next one. Not here either, she yelled out, her mouth stuffed full. Which one is the jackpot? Nami, Dream Chopper croaked out, lying on his back and his stomach looking fit to burst. I can't eat anymore. I didn't think that you boys had a limit to your stomachs. The real Nami couldn't help but laugh as Dream Sanji came over with at least 50 more rice cakes in his arms, and Dream Chopper screamed at the sight of it all. But when the memory faded, she blinked in surprise and cried out, hey! Who won the jackpot? All Luffy cared about was the food, Robin offered, having just seen something sparkling go flying through the air a second before the memory faded, and wondered if that had been the diamond. Of course as he would, Nami whispered, shaking her head at that. Really Luffy, what is up with you? The next dream memory soon came up, and this time they were sitting in a very small hut. It was rather poor looking and a little run down, but it was also full of several of people. Luffy was sitting on the floor next to Dream Chopper, who was frowning slightly as he looked to the patient lying in the futon in front of him. It was Carrot, and his face was redder than his name. In fact, he looked a great deal like how Nami looked when she was brought to Drum Kingdom, and some of them wondered if that incident was what inspired this part of the dream. He looks really bad, Frankie said in concern as he lifted his sunglasses up and looked at Carrot in concern. Like he's frying. He's sick, Real Chopper said, running over and trying to get a good look for himself. Onion and Pepper were sitting next to the futon and were looking at the group with anxious expressions as Dream Chopper told him what was wrong. Influenza, Luffy repeated in confusion as he looked to Chopper. What the heck is that? Dream Chopper folded up his arms as he said, more commonly referred to as the flu. It's a kind of infectious disease. It's contagious, so he shouldn't leave the house. And he needs lots of rest. That sounds just like something you would have said, Chopper-san, Brooke said happily. I've treated people with the flu before, and I guess that Luffy's just remembering what I told them, Real Chopper said in approval. Carrot started to cough a little as Pepper and Onion were both looking upset at the news. What? They both gasped out. But he can't. Pepper said quickly, we were all supposed to go to the Sakura festival tomorrow. A festival? Frankie asked, his eyes shining a little at the thought, but he then realized what it meant for Carrot. Damn, that's got to be the worst. Not to be able to go to a fun thing like that because you're sick. That's just cruel. Dream Chopper looked at them both and said very firmly, that's impossible. If he does that then his condition will worsen. There's a chance he could even die. Would it really be that serious? Brooke asked in worry. The flu is always tricky to deal with, Chopper confirmed as he folded his arms and watched. Sometimes it's just a mild case and you can go out so long as you're not contagious if you really have to. Other times it's so serious that you can't risk even moving without being in terrible pain. I don't think that Carrot would have been in danger of dying here, but still, I rather not risk it. I agree with what I guess I'm saying here. He needs to stay in bed if he wants to get better. How awful, Onion said at the news, yet he couldn't think of a single argument with what Dream Chopper said. And Carrot was really looking forward to it this year too. Yeah, but there's always next year though, Usopp said, remembering back at the village when one of them would get sick and how he would be forced to stay in the house. He really did miss those guys and wondered how they were doing right now. It was like having a punch to the gut and he wished that he could just pick up a transponder snail and talk to them all. Sensei, can't you do anything for him? Pepper asked desperately, you're a doctor. Be that as it may, Dream Chopper said seriously, even a doctor has things they can do and things they can't. Real Chopper nodded firmly. It was a hard thing to accept, but at the least that it was just a case of the flu. Nothing that some rest and good food won't cure with time. Still, it seemed a little cruel in Luffy's dream to have someone miss something like a festival. I'm sorry guys, Carrot said as he pushed himself up a little and coughed some more before he answered, it's my fault I got sick, that's all. No reason to blame Blue Nose Sensei. He laughed a little forcibly but they could all see the sadness in his face. Look, there's no need to worry about me. There's always next year, right? Just go to the festival without me. And he laid back down without saying another word. Poor guy, Nami said sadly, suddenly wishing that there was something that she could do to help. Luffy, make him better already. It's your dream, right? Robin suddenly noticed that they weren't alone and looked to the doorway to see that Rika was there with a wooden basin of water and a clean cloth, looking miserably at the scene in front of her. She walked forward and volunteered to take charge of taking care of Carrot for the rest of the day. After Dream Chopper gave her clear instructions on what to do, he left with Luffy and they went to the pinwheel for their lunch. But neither one was in the mood to eat. It was this that showed them just how troubled they were about this whole thing. Since the boys never ate if they were upset about something, particularly if it involved a friend. They merely picked at their food as Dream Usopp came inside, looking tired and irritable as he took a seat and ordered some food. They learned that since it was now spring, that meant that the town was going to celebrate the blooming of the sakura trees. And they were going to have a big festival under the largest and oldest of all these trees, which they called the Millennium Sakura Tree. That sounds beautiful, Robin smiled as Chopper's eyes shone at the thought and remembered the night he left home where he had seen those same cherry blossoms. Oh, he wanted to see them all again so badly. I could sure go for a party right about now, Frankie sighed. I hear ya, Sanji nodded, knowing that they all needed a nice break after a night on this stupid island. I'd just be happy leaving this place behind, Usopp retorted angrily. And we all make a note on every map never to come here again. Memories, seeing the dead, it's not normal and I want to head back to the sunny. We all do, Zoro said annoyance. But we made our beds and now we have to lie in them. We made a choice and we're going to see this through to the end. I don't know what Ace wanted us to see so badly but it can't be helped. I'm worried though, Nami whispered anxiously. Do you all think that we're using Ace as an excuse to see these private memories? I mean, she looked around at them all and they all felt the same stabs of worry. Was that possible? Were they using Ace's wishes just to satisfy their own curiosity? I don't think so, Brooke said at once and they all looked up at him as he strummed his guitar. I admit that we all have wished to know more about what happened to our dear captain after we were all separated. And I think that Ace-san would know better than anyone what it's like to look into someone's private past. But he was always first, and foremost, a brother. And I don't think that there's a brother alive that doesn't wish for his siblings' happiness. He reached out to us because he wanted us to take care of Luffy-san, didn't he? And the best way to do that is to help him through any hardship. But we can't help him if Luffy doesn't tell us, right? Sanji asked. Yeah, but, Usopp began before Zoro cut in. We all have a lot of apologizing to do when this is all over, Zoro said darkly. But, something happened that day at Marineford. It's been bothering me to no end for a long time now. Luffy's obviously carrying around some kind of darkness from that battle. I know that Ace died, but there's something more to it than that, I just know it. What do you mean? Chopper asked worried. Zoro sighed and he looked up at the scene of Dream Usopp complaining to them all about how he was now stuck on guarding the city while everyone was going to be at the festival. I want to know, but at the same time I don't. When Chopper continued to look confused, Robin spoke up. I agree. There are some things better left unsaid, she stated. But I worry for him. It's as if there's a heavy shadow that follows Luffy everywhere he goes. I mean, I know that it's true to everyone to some extent, but in Luffy's case that darkness seems to be rather extreme. For a great tragedy in your life can weigh you down and plant seeds of doubt. She shut her eyes as she could remember the fire burning her home island, the sounds of the cannon fire like thunder in her ears. It was because of that moment that she allowed herself to become so easily snared by CP9. If her crew didn't come after her when they did, then she wouldn't be standing here right now. She remembered how she screamed out her greatest fears to them and how she truly felt, how they stuck by her anyway, felt like a great weight had been lifted off her soul and she could really start to live again. She wanted to do that with Luffy too. She wanted to help him lift off his own burden and set him free from the ghosts of the past. She opened her eyes again and spoke, let's just stand by him and see this through. Yeah, but, real Usopp repeated firmly before his dream self grumbled, everyone keeps going on and on about the Sakura festival, it's so annoying. Only annoying to you because you didn't get to go, real Sanji coughed out and Usopp glared back at him. Dream Nami was smiling as she told him not to say such things because thanks to that festival, the pinwheel was now filling out orders for lunchboxes and were going to make a lot of money. That tree was a blessing for them, and she then added why he should patrol the town anyway since it was going to be empty, so he should take it easy. She looked up to Luffy and Chopper, and she finally seemed to notice just how grim the two were. It's strange not seeing you boys stuff your faces when there's food in front of you, real Nami stated with a shake of her head. Well, you guys might be pains in the asses to feed, I don't have to worry about any food going to waste, real Sanji nodded. He then looked to the women and added, of course my beloved angels, to cook for you both is the honor of a lifetime. What a sad life you must have then, Zoro spoke and Sanji's eyes turned from hearts to furious glares. Just because you spent your life to learning how to swing a piece of steel around. He retorted. Oh yeah, Zoro demanded, his hand going to his swords, want to see just how well I swing them around then. No, you'd have to be good to start off with. Shut up, Nami yelled at them both as Frankie bravely pushed them apart before someone got killed here. As the two struggled to calm down, Luffy was asking Dream Chopper if there was anything that they could do, which Chopper sadly told him no. Wish there was some way I could show him the Millennium Sakura tree blooming, Luffy sighed grimly. I wish there was some way I could heal him so he could just go, Dream Chopper sighed. At long last, neither one seemed willing to sit there much longer and got to their feet, not being able to think of some way to help their friend. They just headed to the doorway, ignoring Dream Nami as she called after them. They just walked out of the door, said a grim goodbye to the other, before they left. The memory faded there and real Chopper sighed. Being sick is never fun, he stated, but it's always nice to know that someone cares. Yeah, Usopp said, thinking to all the stories that he made up to try and get Kaya to feel better. They say that laughter is the ultimate cure for anything, hey, maybe that's why he never got sick when he was a kid. He was laughing all the time, he'll have to ask Chopper about that later. The newest dream memory popped back up and the first thing they saw was that they were back outside Carrot's house. They quickly spotted Luffy walking up the pathway with that same sad expression, showing that Carrot must still be sick. But his face brightened up at once when he spotted something laying on the ground in front of Carrot's door. It was a single small branch of bright pink cherry blossoms. That's so pretty, Nami said fondly as Luffy ran over to it and picked it up excitedly. Guess someone wanted to make sure that Carrot saw the cherry blossoms after all, Brook said happily. Hey, Carrot, Luffy yelled as he ran inside to see that Carrot was still lying in bed with Rika taking care of him. Carrot opened his eyes sleepily to see who it was and he seemed taken aback by the branch in his hands. Look what I found outside. Luffy went on smiling as he sat down with them and held the branch out for him to see it. Cute, Robin cooed a little. That really is a sweet scene. Yeah, hopefully it'll cheer Carrot bro up a little, Frankie nodded, I mean, it's not the same but it's so heartwarming. And he started to cry. Grow up, Zoro said as he rolled his eyes. Suddenly, Luffy then began to sing a song to try and cheer them up, though Robin couldn't help but notice that Rika had a rather anxious look on her face, a look that didn't seem to have anything to do with Luffy's terrible singing. Yet, just as they were starting to have a good time, the door opened and they saw Dream Usopp and Sanji standing there. They assumed that they came to check up on Carrot until the two saw the branch in Luffy's hands and seemed horror-struck. Dream Usopp even screamed, "What's with him?" Real Sanji asked. Really, they were looking at Luffy like he just robbed from them or something. Luffy looked up at them with Rika and Carrot. Hey, what's up? Luffy asked, what are you two doing here? Don't, what are you two doing here, me? Dream Usopp said, and to their surprise, he pulled out his weapon and pointed it at him as he demanded, explain yourself. Where did you get that branch? It's just a small branch, I don't think that it's anything to freak out about, Real Usopp said, wondering why his dream self was acting like this was such a big deal. Luffy looked from them to the branch in his hands with a surprised look on his face. This? He asked as Rika gave a sharp intact of breath, like she knew something she shouldn't have. Robin was just wondering what was wrong when Dream Usopp yelled out, enough already. What did you do with the Millennium Sakura tree? Wait, what did he do with the tree? Real Sanji asked in confusion. Am I missing something here? It sounds like the tree's gone missing or something. How could you steal a tree? Nami asked quickly. Oh, it depends on the tree, Robin said. People are willing to pay for just about anything on the black market. And if this tree is as special as they say it is, then it's not so far-fetched that someone would want to steal it. Yes, but how? Nami asked slowly. How do you steal a tree? Uprooted, I guess, Brooke said, but why would they think that Luffy-san had anything to do with it? Luffy glanced back at them. What do you mean, what did I do with it? He asked, clearly not understanding just what they were going on about. You just don't know when to quit, do you? Dream Sanji asked, walking forward with a heavy frown on his face. Are you trying to say that despite that branch you don't know anything about the missing Sakura tree? So the tree's really missing? Chopper gasped, and you guys think that Luffy stole it? Luffy's impulsive sometimes, but stealing a tree? Nami asked, unable to think that anyone could believe that. It's not really us who are thinking that. Usopp retorted. Like you wouldn't have blamed him in the real world. Frankie asked, and the two looked at each other, wondering just what they would be thinking if it had happened in reality. Well, Luffy was talking about wanting to show the tree to someone, Robin offered behind them, and he's easily strong enough to have stolen it if given the chance. Hold on a second, did you say that the tree's missing? Luffy asked quickly. Oh, come on, Dream Usopp sighed, obviously not believing that he wasn't involved in the theft. Fess up already, would you? We can still try to sort this out, trust me. Why don't I trust him here though? Real Usopp muttered worriedly to himself. Though now that he thought about it, he did have a problem with wanting to believe the truth of things now, didn't he? Well, he and his lies have gotten him into trouble more than once, so that's only fair, he supposed. Something to work on. I don't know what you're talking about, Luffy said firmly. I found this on the ground and thought that it'd be nice to show it to Carrot. I am sick and tired of your lies. Dream Usopp snapped, now tell me what you did with it. It was me. I put it by the door where he could find it. Aha, I knew it. Dream Usopp yelled out, you put it by the door where you... He stopped when he realized that the confession didn't come from Luffy, but from Rika. Rika? He asked as she slowly turned around to look at them with her face full of guilt, and she lowered her head. I am so sorry. She cried out. Wait, so Rika stole the tree? Chopper gasped at the thought. Oh, something tells me that it's not as simple as that, Nami frowned. Rika, what are you talking about? Dream Usopp asked, you mean you stole the Sakura tree? No, she said, shaking her head hard as she implored to them, just that one branch. They watched as Dream Usopp and Sanji came inside and sat on the floor as Usopp told them what happened. When everyone gathered at the Millennium Sakura tree that moment, all they found was a giant hole where the tree had once been. They then remembered hearing what Luffy said about wanting to show the tree to someone, and they knew better than anyone about his freakish strength, so they decided just to come in and see for themselves. And after seeing the branch, I guess you just jumped to conclusions, Robin answered. But you think that Luffy'd bring the whole tree, not just a branch, to someone, Nami stated. Real Usopp sighed in relief, glad that they cleared up that misunderstanding. Rika shook her head and insisted that Luffy had nothing to do with what she, Pepper, and Onion had done last night. After hearing what Blue Nose Sensei said, she confessed to them all, we really wanted to find a way to show Carrot the Sakura blooms. So Pepper, Onion, and I went to the tree in the middle of the night to see what we could come up with. And so she told them that when they went to the tree, the boys climbed up it to the nearest branch and decided to take just that tiny sprig from the tree. It wasn't much, but at least Carrot would get to see them in full bloom. But as they were getting it, they heard somebody coming. She told them that it was dark and that she didn't see their faces, but she remembered that there were a lot of them, a big crowd, and she warned the boys that they had to get out of there. But there wasn't enough time for them to climb down and escape together, so they threw the branch down to her and told her to run. Pepper told her to put the branch outside Carrot's house and not to let anyone else see her so that they don't get into trouble. They promised that once the coast was clear, they'd climb down and go home so she shouldn't worry about them. As she told the story, Carrot pushed himself up and was staring at her in shock at what they would do for him. Now that's some real friends right there. Frankie cried out once Rika finished telling the story. Oh, man, I love these little guys. You know, I think Rika would be good friends with the boys, Nami stated with a smile. Maybe there's a way that we can introduce them when we travel back to the East Blue someday. That would be nice. Chopper chirped up, wanting to meet everyone from the East Blue that they knew. Seeing these memories were all so great that he just couldn't wait to go there someday. I see, Dream Sanji stated to himself when Rika fell silent. So after that, you came here and left the branch where Carrot could find it. Yeah, sorry, she whispered shamefully, her head still hanging low. Hold on, Dream Usopp said, wait a sec. Does that mean that the culprits who stole the Sakura tree are? Come on, Usopp, Luffy. Maybe, but a couple kids steal a giant tree. Nami scolded, rolling her eyes, and he shrugged back, completely unaware of what his dream self was doing. No way that it was Pepper and Onion, Luffy said at once, before he added, and it wasn't me either. So the true thieves are the ones who showed up after Rika ran away, Dream Sanji summed up before he blinked and gasped in horror. Oh no, this is terrible. Before we came here, I stepped by to check in on Pepper and Onion and neither one of them were home. There's only one place they could be. Oh, that's not good, Brook gasped, knowing what must have happened. They're with the thieves. Real Usopp screamed out in panic. But before the full thought of the situation seemed to sink in, something came flying out of nowhere and landed right in front of Dream Usopp. It happened so quickly that he didn't react at first, but that didn't last long. Where'd that come from? Nami gasped. Don't worry, Robin answered at once. I doubt that was aimed to kill. Just to get their attention. How do you know? Chopper asked quickly and she pointed to the arrow. Dream Usopp screamed and backed away from it as if it was containing a disease or something. But it turned out that it was a single arrow with a note tied to it. See that note? It's a message, she answered. But, Nami began, yet Dream Sanji wasn't afraid as he ripped it off the arrow and unrolled the note. He took one look at it and passed it to Luffy, telling him that he might want to look at it. Robin looked over Luffy's shoulder to read out loud to them all. If you want to know where the missing Millennium Sakura tree is, then come to the docks and I'll show you where the thieves took it. So looks like we have someone on our side helping us out, or them I guess I should say, Zoro stated as Luffy leapt to his feet and went running out of the building. Even as Rika called worriedly after him. But Dream Sanji was right on his heels, with Usopp bringing up the rear. But he stopped long enough to tell them, don't worry. We'll take it from here. Rika, keep an eye on Carrot. Right, she called back as they all bolted and were heading straight down to where the river was. As they ran, they ended up rushing right past Dream Chopper, who was walking by carrying his supplies and looking tired, as if he had been up all night. Oh, Blue Nose Sensei, take good care of Carrot. Luffy called when he and Sanji went running past him. What's going on? Dream Chopper called, watching them run. But rather than spend time explaining, Usopp jogged in place as he quickly told him, thank goodness. He's still sick, so check in on him, please. Sure, bye, Chopper said, though he sounded confused. Even in a dream we can't take a break, Real Sanji sighed as Dream Usopp called to Luffy, asking what made him so sure that what that letter said was real, how it might be a fake. But Luffy didn't listen, just stubbornly telling him that he was sure that it was real and they had to get to the harbor. Right, because arrows falling out of the sky and almost hitting one of your friends are bound to tell the truth. Real Usopp muttered angrily. It missed, didn't it? Frankie laughed as they ran along behind them. It only took a few minutes for their dream selves to reach the docks, and when they did they spotted a familiar figure waiting for them. Hey, isn't that? Dream Usopp asked, but there was no need. It was Dream Robin, looking as calm and collected as she always did, staring out over the water, not even glancing in their direction as they came running up. Oh, my dear Robin, Real Sanji swooned as soon as he saw her, you look as beautiful as you always do. That's a good look for me, Robin chuckled as she looked at the kimono. Maybe I should dress like that more often. Dream Sanji was drooling over the sight of her as Luffy stuttered to a stop, the crushed letter in his hands as he asked quickly, you're the one who sent this, right? Thanks a lot. Where's the Sakura tree? She didn't answer them at first as she merely pointed the reed in her hands out to the island in the distance. It's on the far side of that island over there, she informed them. It appears to be on a ship. It's such a beautiful specimen, she added with a sigh. They're probably planning to sell it to another country, far away from here. That's low, Nami said angrily. Yeah, how could they do something like that? Chopper proclaimed furiously, remembering how it was those blossoms that saved the doctor's life. How dare they take something as special as those flowers away and sell them for money? Dream Robin pointed down to the dock where Pagaya was waiting for them with a small boat. Fortunately, there's a ferry available. You should probably hurry before it's too late, she said. That island's being developed by the Lord so that people can live on it, Dream Usopp said, looking to the island. But it's still deserted for now. It'd be a pretty inconspicuous place to do some dirty business without being seen by anyone. Yeah, 'cause no one's there, Real Zoro stated as if it was obvious. We should head over there and check it out, Luffy decided before he turned to Dream Robin to thank her again, but when he did, she was gone. Whoa, she's gone, Dream Usopp yelled and Sanji looked heartbroken. At least she helped us out before she disappeared. That has always been something you were good at, Real Nami whispered to Robin, who smiled back. A talent won over a lifetime, she said unconcerned. Anyway, we should get going, Luffy said as he headed down the stairs to where the ferry was waiting with Dream Usopp yelling at him to wait up, and both Sanji's moaning at how beautiful she was. Pagaya was more than happy to help them out and he began to ferry them across the water towards the island, all three looking tense and anxious. But as they were nearing the island, they heard the sounds of cannon fire, and when they looked up, they saw a thick cloud of smoke going into the air. You don't think they found Pepper and Onion, do you? Chopper asked anxiously. If they did, then I don't care if this is a dream, I'll pound them flat. Frankie declared. What was that? Dream Usopp asked. It looks like something blew up over there. I sure hope that Pepper and Onion are okay over there, Dream Sanji said as Luffy grabbed him by the front of his kimono. Luffy then stretched out his other arm to grab hold of the giant boulder that was sitting on top of the small mountain. "Thanks, Pop," he called, "I think we can go the rest of the way on our own." "Oh no," real Sanji groaned out, always hating when Luffy catapulted them into the air like that. And pulling the other two along with him, they were sent rocketing right out of the boat, with Dream Pagaya apologizing for not being able to take them all the way. They went flying off and crashing into the giant boulder and were sent flying right off with the rock in tow. And when they looked down, they saw that they had crashed right into the ship where a beautiful cherry blossom tree was. To say that it was beautiful would be an understatement. It had been completely uprooted, yet it still bloomed with the pink blossoms fluttering in the air like rain. It towered over them, reminding them of the night they left Drum, showing how old it was. It had to be as large as some of the trees back at Goa. "Gorgeous," Nami gasped, her eyes bright as Chopper's own eyes shone like stars. "Wait, is that the sexy Foxy?" Brook asked curiously, looking at the large ship that the tree was on. "Hey, it is," real Usopp said before he noticed what he said and groaned. "Don't tell me. Why can't Luffy dream up more threatening enemies?" Zoro groaned. Buggy was bad enough, but they had to deal with Foxy now. And they looked down to spot that Foxy was there all right, looking just as much a clown as Buggy did, and was gapping at the large boulder that had landed on his deck, men scattered all over the dented floor. "Phew, wasn't expecting that," Luffy commented as he looked around curiously from on top of the rock. "Well, it sure left a lasting impression," Brook offered cheerfully. "Not now, Brook," real Sanji muttered as his dream self was asking Usopp if he was alright since he hadn't moved an inch. "What the hell?" Foxy yelled at them. "Hey, what's your problem, damn it?" "Oh, we could be here all day talking about problems," Nami sighed. Foxy though could be there for a week, talking about all his issues. Luffy finally looked up and spotted the tree right there in front of them. "The Sakura tree," Luffy yelled, jumping to his feet, rounding on Foxy. "That must make you the tree thief. How dare you?" Foxy demanded. "You come in from out of nowhere, destroy my ship, and then have the nerve to throw around accusations like that." "He's got a good point," Brook stated. "But he can't really hide the fact that the tree's with him," real Usopp said in annoyance. "I mean," he looked up at the magnificent tree as air was filled with pink petals fluttering in the light wind. "It's right there." As Luffy and Foxy argued, Luffy ended up calling him a split head, which caused Foxy's depression so fiercely that the floor of the deck was actually sinking from where he was sulking. "Yep," real Zoro said with sweat drop hanging around his head, "he's as pathetic as I remember." "At least we're not seeing Crocodile or Eneru," real Usopp offered, personally really glad that they were just stuck dealing with idiots here. "Wow," Dream Sanji said in an impressed voice. "He's really depressed. This guy's got issues. You have no idea, pal," real Sanji sighed tiredly. His dream self went on, "More importantly, boss, I see a familiar face up there on deck." They all looked and spotted the figure of Buggy. "Should have known that he had something to do with all this," Nami sighed, slapping herself with the palm of her hand. "I see," Robin said, reading the scene and understanding at once what was going on. He must have made a deal with Buggy to get him to steal it for him. He would then sell it off to the highest bidder and make even more money. "Low, but effect," Nami sighed, staring at the beautiful tree and knew that any country would kill to have something like that. "Buggy," Luffy yelled angrily, "you just never learn, do you?" And he ran forward to take him out, but when he punched him, Buggy didn't even move, he just stood there like a statue. "What happened?" Chopper cried out in statement. "We've seen this before," Zoro stated, his eyes narrowing. "Whoa, that's weird," Luffy said to himself as they saw Buggy's face slowly start to move and dent in. "What's he doing?" "Not much of anything," Foxy declared. "He's been slowed down from the powers of my slow beam." "Yeah, I can't say that I've missed that thing," Frankie groaned out. "So we're in for another annoying fight." "Great, you need to be careful there, boss," called Pepper's voice. "This guy's got some strange powers." Surprised by the voice, they looked up to the branches and they saw the two kids hiding from behind the branches. They were both unharmed, showing that the pirates clearly didn't realize that they had been up there. Their dream selves were starting to greet them, but that was when the 30 seconds were up and Buggy finally went flying and crashed through the mast. "What's with him?" Luffy demanded, staring at where Buggy lay. "He just now felt that punch. And you're about to suffer from the same fate," Foxy declared, and they glanced at him to see that he moved his hands around and knew just what was coming. "They call me Silver Fox Foxy," he bragged, "and I'm the man who obtains anything that he desires. And you lowly riffraff aren't gonna stand in my way." "Better riffraff than prima donnas," Zoro whispered, shaking his head at the clothes that Foxy was wearing. "He's pretty much the last person to be talking about who the riffraff is anyway," Nami sighed, wanting to punch this guy out. Holding up his hands, he cast his slow beam on Luffy, causing him to slow down to almost a stop. "You know, I had enough of those stupid powers after the Davy back fight memories," Frankie muttered with a roll of his eyes. "We all have," real Usopp declared as Foxy continued to laugh and brag that they could never hope to beat him as he turned to look up at the two kids still in the tree. That finally ticked Dream Sanji off and he went running after him, ready to finally kick that cocky bastard's ass. As the fight went on, Robin and real Zoro noticed that Zoro the monk was also in the tree. He was rather taken aback at his sudden appearance, though with everyone else's attention focused on Sanji and Foxy, they hadn't noticed him yet. Dream Sanji jumped into the air and was just about to bring his foot down on Foxy's head when Foxy sent a beam up at him, and freezing him in midair. He stopped him in midair. Dream Usopp cried out in shock. He then pulled out his jute, but he was able to move the two parts around and string some rubber there like a slingshot, and he fired an exploding star right at him, which Foxy froze as well. "What is this?" he cried out. "I thought the same thing." Real Usopp nodded sagely as he remembered first seeing Foxy's powers. But Dream Zoro surprised them all when he jumped from the tree and landed right behind Foxy with his swords drawn. "So," he said, "it was you." And he was looking ticked off. "How am I supposed to get my free food if there's no festival? That's all you care about?" Chopper yelled at their Zoro. "He stole the tree and you're only upset that you don't get to eat." "Don't yell at me," Zoro answered casually. "Blame Foxy." Now it was Foxy who was looking annoyed. One fool after another. He growled, "Well, I've had enough." Yet the beam had faded off Luffy and he was moving again. "Funny, I was just about to tell you the same thing," he yelled, throwing his arm back. Foxy looked surprised that the 30 seconds was up already and he fired 2 beams at them both, though they were ready this time. Luffy dodged the beam sent at him, while Dream Zoro simply reflected his off one of his swords, redirecting the beam to Buggy, who had just pulled himself out of the rubble. There was an imprint of his makeup left on the mast, and he was furious, yet he just broke apart when he was hit with the beam a second time, freezing him in his tracks. They laughed at the sight of it, but this was just where it was getting interesting. Dream Sanji started moving again and he was finally able to finish up the kick that he had started, slamming down onto Foxy's head, causing teeth and blood to pop out of the moron's mouth. Just then, the exploding star that Dream Usopp fired before, started moving and hit him as well. "See, real Usopp bragged. Even frozen for 30 seconds, I still hit my target. Awesome, Usopp." Chopper cheered. Through the thick smoke, Luffy had delivered the final blow, bringing his right hand back after stretching it at least a mile away. And with one punch to the face, Foxy was sent flying right off his deck and up into the sky. "You know, we really need to start sending all our enemies flying off like that." Real Sanji laughed as he held up a hand to shade his eyes and watched Foxy go farther away. "Too bad that doesn't seem to stop them from coming after us," Zoro said with eyebrows raised as he glanced over at Buggy and shook his head in pity. "Really, just what was the deal with this guy? He's like a cockroach. It didn't matter how many times you stepped on him, he just kept coming back." "Ah," Dream Sanji said, watching with great interest as Foxy soon became a star in the sky. "You really sent him flying, didn't ya?" His eyes then narrowed as they glanced over at the still frozen Buggy. "By the way, what should we do about him?" "Get rid of him," Real Nami sighed. "Toss him overboard if you have to. This guy is nothing but a pain." "Nami-san is so harsh," Brook whispered and Chopper nodded in agreement next to him. Luffy seemed to be thinking the same thing and was strolling over, looking up at Buggy with irritation on his face. "You've gotta be the dumbest guy in the world," he told him, and not a single one of them could disagree with that. "Just give the crazy plans a rest already. Looks like you'll be missing the festival this year." After that, he delivered a series of punches from his Gatling gun technique before he turned back to his friends as if nothing had happened. After he invited Monk Zoro to join them, Buggy was sent blasting off once again until all they could see was the shine from his nose. The real Straw Hats all laughed at how stupid this whole thing had been before the group tied up the rest of Buggy's crew to the mast and they sailed the ship with the tree still on board. Yet they watched as they took the long way back, bringing the tree near the bridge where all the villagers could see it. But as they passed by the town, they called to Carrot and the others, and they could see Carrot's face lighting up and he was already looking 10 times better than he had been before as he waved back to them. And the dream then faded with them having a party on deck, enjoying a good meal as Usopp stuck the chopsticks into his nose and began to dance. "What a day that would have been," Brook said enviously, wishing that they could have a part under the blossoms like that. He knew just the perfect song to play for just such an occasion. "Well, I'm sure that we'll find more cherry blossoms if we keep traveling," Nami said hopefully, "and we'll have a great big festival of our own under it." There were cheers from some of the more sensitive members of the crew, but even those like Robin and Zoro were smiling a little at the thought. Just as some of them were even beginning to make plans for such an event, the next dream came up and they were back at the pinwheel with Luffy and Dream Chopper sitting at their usual table and happily eating as Dream Nami passed Chopper some tea. As they watched, they heard Dream Usopp's voice yelling from the street. "Big news! Big news! Why is it that every time you seem to be running in, there's bound to be trouble not too far behind?" Real Nami sighed. "Hey, I want to know why I'm the bearer of bad news too," Usopp retorted coldly as his dream self burst through the door, carrying a large piece of paper with him before he held it up for them all to see. Dream Nami came out, demanding to know what was going on when he shoved the poster into her hands. "The Grand Portable Shrine Race," she asked as she took the poster and read over it with interest. "Portable shrines?" Real Chopper asked in confusion. In some parts of the world they have races like this, Robin informed him. It's like a parade where the teams would carry their shrine from one place to another. It really is something to see. Really? That sounds really cool. Chopper chirped up at such an idea. That's right. Dream Usopp cried out. The whole town's excited about this event. He stopped talking long enough to take a deep breath as Dream Nami continued to read it. A race that takes place every 100 years, huh? Nami asked, sounding slightly interested. I've heard of that race, Dream Sanji called from behind the counter as a man with a panda face sitting there enjoying his food. I've also heard that there's supposed to be an amazing prize for it. That guy looks familiar, Chopper whispered, looking at the panda man. I think that we'd remember seeing a guy like him, Real Nami said, wondering where Luffy got the idea of a man with a panda face. I've heard that the winner is able to make a wish on some kind of treasure in the Grand Shrine, Dream Chopper said, looking up and joining in the conversation. A wish, Brook said in amazement at such a thought as another familiar face came out from the back. It was Makino and she had a friendly smile on her face as she asked, will anything come true? I know, it wasn't really Makino in the episode, but in my story it is. Makino, my love, Real Sanji gasped out. Oh, how long has it been since I've seen your beautiful face? Makino walked forward and handed Dream Usopp a cup of water, which he took gratefully, and Nami introduced her as their new waitress. And when Luffy asked for a refill on his rice, she gave him a double serving, which caused his eyes to glow happily and he went to work on eating that. You don't have to spoil him with that much service, Makino-chan, Dream Nami said in annoyance. He's just gonna put it on his tab and not pay for it anyway. Yeah, makes me wonder just how much free food she had given him when Luffy was a kid, Real Nami sighed sympathetically. Luffy could clean out any restaurant easily. Well, he did say that he'll pay her back when he gets some treasure, didn't he? Chopper pointed out. Right, problem with that is that he spends it far too quickly. She retorted. You boys have no sense of money. The way that you guys throw it around makes me think that it grows on trees. Well, cash is made out of paper and paper does come from trees, Robin offered and Nami glared at her. You're not helping here, Robin. She yelled at her as Makino smiled at Dream Nami and went to the back again as everyone turned their attention to the idea of the race. Oh, Dream Usopp said, looking at Chopper, what about that treasure thingy, anyway? Well, Dream Chopper said slowly, it is said that the treasure is only shown once every 100 years. It has the mysterious treasure to grant any one wish. A certain detective whose wish came true, became a samurai. And a certain cook was married to the most beautiful woman in town and lived happily ever after. Really? Real Usopp said, his face lighting up at the thought of becoming a brave warrior, and Sanji looked as if he couldn't have asked for anything better. Their dream selves had identical grins on their faces as they were both clearly thinking the same thing and stated at the same time, that's my kind of prize. Luffy didn't look to be too interested in the prize itself. That sounds interesting, he said with food in his mouth, but from the glint in his eyes they knew he was thinking more of the race. Suddenly he cheered out, okay. Let's enter that portable shrine race. How did I not see that coming? Real Usopp laughed. No way. Dream Nami snapped stubbornly. I don't want to enter that race and get myself all drenched in sweat for such a stupid reason. Exactly right, my love, Real Sanji said, though he couldn't help but let his mind stray to such a thought. But that problem was solved almost at once when Dream Chopper, who was now looking over the paper himself, took a sip of tea and read out, and it also seems like the winner is awarded 1 million berries. What are you waiting for? Real Nami cried out. Go out there and win the whole thing already. When money is involved, there's nothing that Nami wouldn't do for it, Real Usopp whispered, and most of the boys had sweat drops hanging around their heads. The sad thing was, they knew that it was true. As for the dream counterpart, she had gold shining in her eyes as she proclaimed, as if to the rest of the world, okay. Let's hurry up and get ready. We're gonna win that portable shrine contest. And that was when she started to bark orders to the boys. She told Sanji to stay here and take care of the restaurant while she took the other 3 with her to find someone to build a shrine for them. She pulled them through the town, though Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper didn't seem to mind this so much as they kept coming up with idea after idea for what they want their shrine. They reached the same bridge that they had seen the villagers on during the festival and heading to the other side. As they walked, Frankie laughed when they saw Yokozuna go swimming by them, and Dream Usopp was asking Nami where they were going. The lumberyard, she answered as if it was obvious. Why there? Dream Usopp asked, sounding lost. She turned to look at them and smiled. I heard that there's a really skilled carpenter who is known as the best. Wait, could it be? Frankie asked eagerly, looking around eagerly. Well, who else could it possibly be? Robin chuckled to herself and Frankie was now bouncing around eagerly, like a little kid promised a real treat. They reached the other side of the river where there was a large building surrounded by large logs of wood, and Frankie whistled in an impressed way as he looked about. Not a bad place, he confessed, and he knew that if there was any place in this dream world that he would be. Excuse me, Dream Nami called, but it looked completely dark inside the building. Is anyone home? Before they could figure out what to do, something came flying towards them and hit her in the face. It turned out to be a rather nice red cloth, and she pulled it off to admire it. My bad, called a voice just then, and real Frankie couldn't have looked any happier. Thank you, he called out. About damn time that Army made his appearance. Yes, Brooke sighed, once again, feeling a little left out here. But he forgot all about that when Dream Frankie walked right out of the darkness. He looked just like the way that Frankie looked 2 years ago. He even dressed much of the same way with the open shirt and sunglasses, except for the fact that he wasn't wearing his Speedos. Actually, he wasn't wearing anything else. His entire lower half was completely exposed and they were staring at him in shock. You picked it up for me? Dream Frankie asked when he stopped in front of them. Thanks, sis. I thought that I'd never have to see your balls again, Frankie, Sanji said, rolling his eyes. Hey, I happen to think I look damn good here. Real Frankie said proudly as his dream self said, it was blown away when I was drying it with the Frankie's Workshop's special super dryer machine. Super dryer machine. Real Chopper repeated in confusion, but Frankie just shrugged back, just as lost as he was. Master, cried out two voices, and Frankie was thrilled to see his little sisters there. Kiwi and Mozu, both dressed in pink and yellow work kimonos, came running out from the dark as well. Going out in public dressed like that, Kiwi cried out, is a really bad idea. Mozu finished as they held up two large hammers to try to hide his family jewels. That was close, they both sighed in relief and wiped their brows. I'm afraid that it's a little too late for that, Robin chuckled as the rest of them were just stunned at the whole scene. Though now that they thought about it, that would be something that the real Frankie would have done, he sure wasn't shy. You didn't make it in time. Dream Nami and Usopp screamed together. Dream Frankie just held out his hand to Nami and asked, well, could you give that back to me, sis? When she looked confused, he gestured to the red cloth in her hands and told her that it was his loincloth. He posed, with his sisters desperately trying to block the world from his junk, and Dream Nami dropped the cloth, her face twisted in horror. At the news of what that red cloth really was, both Namis seemed to be stuck in some kind of nightmare before they both screamed out at the top of their lungs, LLL loincloth. Dream Nami screamed and went to go scrub her face in the river as Dream Frankie looked on in confusion. What's with her? He asked them and they all shrugged. Luffy, I'm gonna kill you for this. Real Nami screamed out furiously, feeling completely grossed out at such a thought. Really, what's your problem? Frankie asked, but shut up at once when she turned to glare at him. No one dared say another word as they followed Dream Frankie inside his shop, where he put on a white loincloth and turned to admire his latest invention. It was a tall pillar-shaped stand where a fan that held Sunny's face, spinning its sunflower-like mane around wildly as it was drying Dream Frankie's other loincloths. Dream Frankie had taken his seat after they told him about wanting him to build them a portable shrine for the race. So that's my dryer, Real Frankie said, looking up at it impressed. He never thought about it, but that wasn't such a bad idea. Doing laundry on the Sunny had always been a hassle, and this would certainly make things easier. As the easily amazed members of the crew and in the dream world stood there admiring the invention, Dream Nami continued to stand there, looking like she was about to be sick. While the real version shook her head in an irritated way. So, Real Frankie said as he settled down comfortably with the square sisters on either side of him, what kind of portable shrine do you want me to build? Well, Dream Usopp said, as if he hadn't really thought of that, but Luffy summed it up for them easily. One that can win, he cried out excitedly, and Usopp grinned at the thought. No duh, Real Frankie said, but you need to be a little more specific if you want help. Do you want one with cannons attached to it, or can't you build anything normal? Nami asked him. He thought that over, having never really noticed it before. He shrugged and said, where's the fun in something without the risk that it might blow up on you? Yeah, Nami, Usopp, Chopper, and Brooke all recited, and she gave them all a dirty look. Men, what could you do with them? That's right, Dream Usopp said with a serious expression, as if he was just trying to be cool. Make us a really cool one that can win for sure. You say that so easily, Dream Chopper piped up as he continued to look over the poster from before. But the other racers sure seem tough. There's the legendary rider team that's known as the fastest in these parts. The Flying Fish Crimson Squad. Flying Fish, Sanji repeated before he groaned out. Not that moron Duval, I thought we had enough of him. And then there's the company that's keen for love and quick on the job, Dream Chopper went on, the Rolling Post Office. Rolling Post Office, Brooke repeated in confusion. The Rolling Pirates, Nami asked, her face brightening up. I can't think of anyone keener for love than Lola. Oh, I'm so glad. Does that mean that she's gonna be in the race too? Knowing this whole place, Arlong or Aokiji could be racing here too, Zoro stated causally. They're all very well-known teams, Dream Chopper seemed to finish up. There are other rivals too. His eyes suddenly fell on one name and asked, Thriller Company. Thriller, Brooke whispered. Don't tell me, Sanji groaned as Luffy asked who they were. But at that moment, shadows crept across the ground, and when they looked to see where they were coming from, they all groaned out. Standing in the doorway were none other than Hogback, Absalom, Perona, the zombie Sindri, and the bear zombie holding up a giant umbrella. as well as surrounded by several dozen zombies, each one dressed in the same kind of attire that they had gotten used to seeing in this dream. Why them? Zoro moaned, slapping his face in annoyance. Buggy and Foxy were bad enough. Now we have to put up with them too. Sanji whispered. Damn it, Luffy. What's wrong with you? Who are you guys? Luffy asked, his eyes narrowing at the sight of them. They're the guys you were just talking about, Dream Frankie explained darkly. They're Thriller Company, a company that deals with important products in that newly built 13-story building. And the fact that they're here can't mean anything good, Real Chopper said, frowning heavily at Hogback, wishing that he had his chance to fight him again. At least we haven't seen Moria around yet, Nami said, running her hand through her long hair. Don't jinx it, Real Frankie hissed. Then you guys came to ask for a portable shrine too? Dream Usopp asked. Hogback laughed at such an idea and informed them, our portable shrine is already built. Then why are you all here? Zoro yawned in a bored way. But he got his answer when Perona laughed. We just came to warn you guys that it's useless to participate in the race, she told them mockingly. Oh, they came here to trash talk us, Real Usopp muttered, that makes sense. Dream Usopp looked ticked off and was demanding to know what they meant by that, with Dream Nami backing him up. Anyway, it's best that you listen to us, Hogback stated, not the least bit interested in anything that they had to say. You don't want to get hurt, do you? I think he should be asking himself that same question, Chopper said fiercely. He's the one more likely to get hurt. He's a doctor anyway, so it's not like we need to hold back fighting him anyway, Nami offered with a shrug. But then Sindri stood in front of him, blocking him from their view, and he asked her rather timidly why she was standing in front of him. Dream Nami looked ready to laugh and instead criticized that there was no use threatening them, but Hogback only laughed and taunted them that they aren't safe since they stood up to them. But as he bragged, the rest of his gang had already turned and left him there. Well, with friends like them, who needs enemies? Real Usopp whispered as Luffy pointed out that he was on his own. When Hogback realized that he was alone, he seemed to lose his nerve and stuttered out one more threat before he turned and ran off. Their dream selves were all muttering furiously about those guys, and Dream Chopper folded his arms, frowning heavily at the open doorway. They might be planning something for us now, he told them. Who cares? Sanji shrugged. I wanna take that freak with the lion mouth on again. I'm gonna break his legs. Okay, listen, Dream Frankie said dramatically, getting up to his feet. Don't lose to guys like them. I'll make a super portable shrine for you guys. One that will definitely win. So win. And they all cheered in agreement, all of them promising that they were going to take the prize from right under their noses. Like hell we were going to let them beat us. Sanji yelled out, all pumped up and wishing that this was all real. Don't worry, I doubt that we'd ever lose a race while we're in Luffy's on Dream, Robin laughed. The dream soon came back up and Luffy was walking with Dream Chopper, the two of them talking excitedly about the race that was coming up next week. As they went over every little detail about the shrine that Frankie had told them about, they heard Usopp's scream of terror going on not far away. They all looked, startled, at what was causing him to scream like a little girl. And there he was. Dream Usopp was running towards them like the devil, himself, was at his heels, and they saw what was causing it. Hanging onto the back of his clothes, was none other than Brook. Oh, Real Brook cried out in amazement. That's me. Unlike the rest of them, the only real difference with Dream Brook was some of his afro had been done up with that top knot. Otherwise, he was wearing the same clothes he had when they first met him, but they were dirty and had bits of slime and scum stuck to it while it was much more ragged. It was as if he had been rotting somewhere just moments before. What happened? Real Brook, looking at how his dream self was. I don't look so good. A skeleton, Luffy yelled as Dream Chopper screamed. But Luffy went running forward and pulled Brook off Usopp's back, who seemed to be trying hard not to go into shock. Dream Brook just hung there limply in Luffy's hands as Dream Usopp was crying and rocking back and forth as he told them that he was just fishing at his favorite spot when he pulled him up from the river. Help me, Dream Brook whispered, and at that moment they heard his stomach rumble with food. Not that he had a stomach. Sounds like he's hungry, Luffy reasoned. Figures he'd understand that much, Nami said lightly. Hungry. Dream Usopp choked back, you mean, as in a human flesh kinda hungry? That kind of hungry? No, Dream Brook whispered in hardly more than a croak. But do you know a good restaurant around here? He couldn't have picked better words. Luffy happily dragged him behind him like how a little kid would drag a rag doll, but after Dream Brook began to talk to Dream Usopp and Chopper, and made all sorts of skull jokes. After seeing that he truly didn't seem to want to hurt them, the two were starting to warm up to him, and by the time that they arrived at the pinwheel, they were even starting to laugh along with him. When they brought him in, Dream Sanji and Nami looked a little apprehensive about feeding him, but after seeing how much he was suffering, they brought some out. Dream Brook had eaten like he hadn't had food for weeks. With every bit of food he put into his mouth, the greenish tint to his bones slowly began to turn back to white and he seemed to be feeling better. Geez, when did you last eat, pal? Real Sanji asked as he watched him shove a whole fish into his mouth. No idea, Real Brook said, but suddenly he began to dance around happily, but I'm so glad to see that I'm in the dream with all of you. I was starting to get rather lonely. And what do you think it is that you do? Zoro asked. If I had to guess, maybe a bard, someone who traveled around and played music. Robin offered and Brook looked excited at that thought. That sounds perfect for me. Yo ho ho ho. Real Brook laughed. You sure eat a lot, Dream Nami said as Makino nodded behind her, looking completely relaxed despite the fact that there was a living skeleton eating at the table. Man, this guy has no manners, Real Sanji said in annoyance. Who is this guy anyway? Luffy and Chopper, who were sitting opposite Brook, were watching him in interesting, marveling at how much he was eating. But then they turned back to Nami and Sanji and were asking for more food as well. Those who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, Robin answered. Huh, Real Chopper asked in confusion. It means that you shouldn't criticize someone for something you do as well, she smiled back. Don't eat with him, Dream Nami yelled at them. Alright, pay up, Makino said with a smile to Usopp. Why me? He yelled at her. Why was I the one paying for you guys? Real Usopp demanded. Someone had to, Nami said firmly. And since Luffy never pays, that left you. Oh, thanks, he snapped at her. Dream Brook, who had finally eaten his fill, was picking his teeth and was politely thanking them for the meal, though the effect was ruined when he kept burping. You're seriously rude, Dream Sanji yelled, running out from the back. Who the hell are you? As if he just realized that he had yet to introduce himself, he immediately got down on one knee and he said, I'm sorry for the late introduction. Nice to meet you. I am Dead and Only Bones, Brook. I was born in, he then sat back up and took his tea. I forget. Way to shoot our expectations down, bro, Frankie said with a snort. Why would I forget? Real Brook asked in confusion as their dream selves practically fell over at those words. Dream Usopp leapt back to his feet and yelled, what's that supposed to mean? If you're gonna introduce yourself, go all the way. It makes me uneasy. I only remember my name, Dream Brook confessed and you could see the question marks hanging around his head, and they heard a slight clatter inside his head. Really? Real Brook said in great surprise. Well, that happens, Real Chopper said. Sometimes through a great shock to the head, or even just a traumatic experience can cause short-term memory loss. Oh, that is truly not good, Brook said as Dream Chopper was asking pretty much the same thing, if he lost his memory due to shock. Dream Brook tilted his head a little to the side, trying to remember, but that was when they heard that strange clattering sound inside his head again. Hey, isn't there something in his head that's making that noise? Dream Usopp asked worriedly. Maybe a screw came loose. Dream Nami offered and Brook seemed worried at such an idea and quickly popped the top of his head open like a hatch so that Luffy and Chopper were staring at him in amazement while the others seemed taken aback and screamed at him for that. The real Brook knew that he kept the precious tone dial inside his head, but wondered just what it was he kept here. And it turned out that his dream counterpart pulled out a flute, a long one, and they couldn't help but wonder just how he was able to fight that thing inside his head. But then again, not only was this a dream, nothing about Brook was normal. What's going on inside your head? Both Usopp screamed out. Luffy just laughed as the memories began to fade. You're an interesting guy, they heard Luffy's voice ring out before darkness came. Thank you for your kind words, Luffy-san. Real Brook cried out gratefully, waving his hands up and in the air. In the next dream memory, they standing outside the pinwheel, with Brook changed into some clean, new clothes that made him look more like he was a part of this place. The dream memories after that were mostly of him and the time that he spent with his new friends. He still didn't remember much about who he was or where he came from, but that didn't matter. He would walk with Luffy and Usopp through town and entertain the children by opening the top of his head to their amusement. Oftentimes they would sit by the bridge where Usopp first pulled him up from the river and just fish there for long hours at a time. And when things got too boring, Dream Brook would pull out his flute and play for them. They all enjoyed the dreams up till then, but as is typical of their misfit crew, things didn't stay calm for long. They reached a memory where Luffy was walking with Brook and Usopp from a big dinner at the pinwheel, looking fully and happy. Well, Luffy and Brook did anyway. Dream Usopp would just look sadly at his empty coin bag. Luffy sighed contentedly as he said, I sure ate a lot. Yo ho ho ho, I can't help myself but eat a lot when I'm with you, Luffy-san, Dream Brook said happily. You guys seriously eat too much, Dream Usopp whimpered. You seriously do, Real Usopp moaned, glad that he didn't have to pay for them in real life. Like you're any better, Nami muttered with a roll of her eyes. Chopper suddenly screamed and they looked up in time to see a terrifying portable shrine go by. It looked like a giant girl in a white wedding dress, and her lips were puckered out as if she was about to kiss someone. Scary, the boys all whispered as Robin laughed. But what got their attention was that it was floating right by them. Our shrine didn't fly, Chopper said in surprise. Well, nothing about this place makes sense, Nami said before a smile came over her face when she saw Lola running out with the Risky brothers, calling for their shrine to come back. As for Luffy and the other boys, it seemed to take a few seconds for them to grasp at what was happening. While they didn't understand, they knew that they had to go after it. Let's go after it, Luffy yelled, and suddenly all three were giving chase. Luffy was in front and had quickly caught up to Lola and the brothers. "Oh, you're handsome," Lola said when she saw Luffy. "Marry me." "No," Luffy said bluntly, not needing to stop and think about it nor even looking at her as he ran forward. "Rejected," the Risky brothers shouted out dramatically. "It's the 4450th rejection." "Poor girl," Robin smiled. "But she sure isn't afraid of rejection, is she?" "No, I doubt that after over 4,000 times, she doesn't feel anything about someone saying no to her," Frankie laughed. "Hold it," Luffy shouted out, and the shrine did seem to slow down when he yelled, "Stop right there, portable shrine." Yet just as he almost caught up with it, at least a dozen zombies jumped down from the rooftops and blocked him. They were all dressed as ninjas, with white cloths covering their faces, though why they did have those cloths was anyone's guess. "Yeah, real scary," Sanji said sarcastically. "You might scare kittens at this rate." "I think they're scary," Brook cried out. "Have you looked in a mirror lately?" Nami demanded. "What are you guys?" Luffy asked as they wiggled their arms at him. The others had finally caught up with them, and when Dream Brook saw them, he screamed in terror, trying to skid to a stop, but he was still flying right at them. Though, as they jumped at them, Brook seemed to rely on instinct, pulling out a blade from the bamboo hanging at his side and struck at them with his sword. And he went on to them all. Every single zombie that he slashed out looked like a flash of light, and then when he resheathed his sword they all fell to the ground. Luffy let out an impressed cry and clapped his hands at the display. "Wow, great job, Brook," he cried out as Dream Brook looked up, glancing around in a confused way. "Nice to see that my skills haven't dulled in a dream," Real Brook said approvingly. "That never gets old," Robin smiled, amazed that someone could move that fast. "Why do I know this move?" Dream Brook asked himself, as if lost in thought. Just then, they heard the sounds of running footsteps behind them, and they looked back to see Dream, Nami and Sanji running at them, demanding to know what was going on. Yet before they could even begin to explain, they heard something heavy crashing nearby. "Oh no," Real Nami said, running down the street, knowing that it could only be one thing here. And she groaned to see that she was right. Lola and the Risky brothers were staring in horror at their portable shrine, which had been smashed to pieces. "Marry me," the shrine's speaker said before it died. "I think that thing's scarier than the zombies," Real Usopp whispered as Zoro and Frankie nodded with him. "How terrible," Dream Sanji said when they had come running up behind them. "This isn't good," one of the brothers said. "We can't enter the race like this now. We have no choice but to forfeit," the other said as Lola fell to her knees. "When will I be able to marry?" she asked in despair. "Don't worry, girl," Frankie stated, "that determination will take you there." "Yeah, but there's only so far that it can take you," Zoro muttered, knowing that some man would have to be pretty desperate to get a girl to agree to marry someone who proposes before they even said hello. But as they watched the team lament over their broken shrine, Dream Usopp suddenly gasped. "If this is an action against the Consters, then that means our portable shrine is in danger." "No, before that, Makino-chan is in danger," Dream Sanji declared. What the hell am I talking about there?" Real Sanji cried out, his eyes wide at the thought of a beautiful woman in danger. They all looked at him in confusion until Dream Nami explained, "She hasn't come back ever since she went to deliver lunch to the Frankie workshop. We were on our way to see what had happened when we heard the commotion. I swear, if they heard one hair on Makino-chan's head," Real Sanji yelled out, and he bolted down the road with everyone else, Real and Dream, right behind him. "He does remember that this isn't real, right?" panted Usopp, sick of all the running they've been doing all night. "It's very easy to forget, believe it or not," Nami reminded him as they just continued on their way. They made it to the bridge in record time and were already halfway across when they heard a scream. They put on an extra burst of speed, and standing there on the bridge was Makino with two zombies there. The Real Sanji was already there, lashing out, and tried to kick the zombies away from her as she continued to scream. "Damn it, Luffy. Get you ass over here already," he bellowed out, and Luffy wasted no time in unleashing a gum-gum bazooka, and sent them both flying off into the distance. They quickly checked in on Makino, who was luckily just shaken up and unharmed. She tried to tell them that she was heading back to get them when a girl with pink hair and floating in the air sent those zombies at them. Frankie and the girls had stayed behind to deal with them, but as she was running away, those two zombies had caught up with her. "Perona," Zoro said in annoyance. "Of course it would be her. I get it," Sanji suddenly hissed, thinking of that bastard Absalom. That guy could turn invisible. He told Luffy about his powers, so that was what happened with that floating shrine. It wasn't floating at all, that asshole was carrying it the whole time. They didn't waste any more time. They helped Makino to her feet and continued on the rest of the way to where Dream Frankie's workshop was. They all ran the rest of the way across the bridge to where Frankie's workshop was. And when they went bursting in through the doorway, they saw the whole horror scene. Their portable shrine, which looked just like the Sunny, lay in a giant pile of splinters, while Frankie, Mozu, and Kiwi were all lying there beaten up and bleeding. "Damn it," Real Frankie roared out. "You mean I let her beat me? Given Perona's abilities, it doesn't surprise me," Robin reminded him, thinking back to how Frankie had easily fallen prey under her negative ghosts. Luffy went over to help Frankie up as Nami barked at Sanji to get Blue Nose Sensei, and he left without another word. Meanwhile, she and Makino went to the Square Sisters to see how they were doing. As Luffy pulled Frankie up, who was still out cold, Brook suddenly fell to his knees, holding onto his skull as if he suddenly had a terrible headache. "Hey, what's wrong?" Dream Usopp asked in concern. "My head hurts," he whispered back, "my eyes are getting blurry, even though I am only bones and have no eyes, yo-ho-ho-ho." "Really Brook, there's a time and place for your stupid jokes," Real Sanji groaned out. "Yo-ho-ho-ho, sorry," Brook said. But those jokes were a part of him and he couldn't change that any more than Zoro could change his love for the sword. "You're too relaxed," Dream Usopp said in annoyance, but then Brook gave a sharp intake of breath and was slowly looking up at them all. "I remembered," he whispered in shock. "Oh," Real Brook said happily. "Did my memories before come back? What a joyous thing. Did your memories come back?" Dream Usopp asked in surprise as Brook slowly pushed himself to his feet. "Yes," he whispered, but there wasn't any happiness on him and the real Brook didn't like how grim his counterpart had become. "I remembered everything." But to their surprise, Dream Brook merely pulled on his cloak and wrapped it around his shoulders as he set his hat on his head. They all looked at him in surprise and Usopp was asking what he was doing before the skeleton answered, "I cannot stay here." "That's because," he lowered his head, as if in shame, "I used to be a member of Thriller Company." Most of them gasped along with the four women in the dream. You mean?" Real Brook stuttered, unable to believe his own ears, "not that he had them." "Luffy-san made me a villain. Do you look like a villain here?" Zoro asked him. "This is all part of our captain's crazy mind." "Yeah but," Brook stuttered again as Memory Nami was asking what he was talking about, with Luffy just looking long and hard at him. Hey, Dream Usopp said, a forced smile on his face, "That's a tough joke." But Dream Brook didn't laugh. He just had that reserved, melancholy look hanging about him. "Thank you for your care," he said sadly before he turned around and left them, humming his favorite song under his breath. Real Brook couldn't help but mourn the fact that he had worked with such a horrible organization and they were all telling him over and over again that it wasn't real. But he just couldn't believe that, even in a dream, he would work for such people. "But you did say that you used to be a member," Usopp tried to remind them. "So, maybe something went wrong." Brook stopped sobbing dramatically at those words and thought it over. "Dream Brook did say that," Nami added as Chopper nodded at once. Since it got Brook to stop crying, they were glad that the dream came back and they were still in Frankie's workshop. Dream Sanji and Blue Nose Sensei were there and he was the one treating their injuries. It turned out that their wounds weren't as bad as they looked and that those zombies beat the crap out of them when they were affected by those stupid ghosts so that they couldn't even fight back. "Damn ghosts," Real Frankie snarled, still wishing that there was some way that he could have given those things a piece of his mind, or rather his fists. Dream Chopper helped to put Frankie's hurt arm in a sling made of wooden splits and cloth before he went to the Square Sisters and began to treat their cuts and bruises. "You should be alright now," Dream Chopper promised. "Thanks for that," Dream Frankie said, tightening the sling a little before he looked to them all and added, "But the race is tomorrow and I let them destroy your portable shrine." "It's okay thought," Real Nami said, "you could have easily repaired it right." "Yeah, remember how you built that ship big enough to hold Lily and Pan's Fry, remember?" Chopper added. "Yeah, but I just took the stuff from the submarines that were going after them," Frankie confessed. "I didn't really have to do much to change that. Here, I would have to rebuild it from scratch, and with one arm too. And don't forget, this is before my 2-year vacation. I suppose that if we all worked on it together and through the night, we'd have it done in time." "Please," Makino said worriedly, "it's not your fault." "So this means that the ones to blame are Hogback and his gang," Dream Usopp said bitterly before he glanced up at the sky where the moon was fully. "Brook. Where did Brook go?" Dream Chopper asked in concern. Real Brook had a very good idea. If he really had worked for someone like them and they had gone and done something as disgraceful as this, he'd go to confront them. If his dream self was anything like him, then that's where'd he go. "Shall I tell you?" asked Robin's voice, and they looked up to see Dream Robin leaning against the doorway with that same smile on her face. "How is it you always seem to turn up when we need you?" Real Nami asked her in amazement and she laughed back as Dream Usopp asked who she was. Dream Robin just smiled back and answered, "Just a village girl who happened to pass by here." "She's so beautiful," Dream Sanji sighed happily as Nami eyes at his behavior. "She really is," Real Sanji said, and the real Nami looked like she wanted to smack some sense into his head. Dream Robin only smiled innocently as she told them, indeed, that skeleton used to be a member of Thriller Company. Yet, he got fed up with their evil methods and left the organization. But maybe he felt responsible for all the portable shrines that were destroyed today. "So that's what happened," Zoro said, thinking it over. "I guess that when you stood up to them, they didn't like your resignation and they threw you into the river. And maybe that's what caused you to lose your memory," Chopper added in understanding. "I'm just so happy that I'm not the bad guy here." Brook sobbed out joyfully. And that was all Luffy needed to hear. He turned and bolted from the building, even as Dream Nami yelled at him to come back. But they followed after Luffy, already guessing where he was going. He stretched his arms out and latched onto a kind of water tower before he launched himself through the air, practically flying as he headed to a single building in the center of the town, where it looked like all of the other buildings, only it towered over them all and had a large chain that looked like the one from Thriller Bark. But as they continued to soar towards it, they spotted some kind of explosion of smoke already going off, and they knew that it had all gone straight to hell down there. The scene they saw next was one of confusion, however. In a large courtyard they saw that Hogback was there along with Absalom and Perona, and several dozen zombies as back, but Dreambrook was tied to a post and had a couple large blocks of stone crushing his legs. OWW, Frankie winced at the sight of them. It's a good thing that Brook didn't have any family jewels anymore, for that would have been a terrible way to get rid of them. Yet what really confused them was the smashed down front door, and Zoro the monk was there, glaring around at them all. "Geez, did someone wake you up from a nap or something?" Usopp asked Zoro. "How would I know?" Zoro snapped back, really getting tired of being stuck in a dream. But Luffy landed hard on his feet, glaring around fiercely at them, with Dreambrook calling out in relief when he saw him. "Why, this is a truly shameful thing," Realbrook said as Luffy smiled and walked over to his dream self. "I'm sure that all he wanted was to try and set things right, but I ended up messing it up. First of all, it's not really you there, but look, you were outnumbered," Sanji stated. "It's the thought that counts," Robin chuckled as Luffy started to untie him. "Why'd you go off on your own?" Luffy asked. "Come on, let's go." "Don't you even go there, Luffy," Nami said, rolling her eyes. If there was anyone here who needed to hear that, it was him. But as he lifted off the heavy bricks, Hogback stepped in to stop him. Luffy didn't look happy to see him, but he told him that he didn't have business with them right now. "Yeah, we'll show him up in the race." Sanji laughed. But to his disgust, Absalom laughed as well and told them that they weren't going to hand the traitor over without a fight, and Perona ordered their zombies to attack. At her command, they all charged at them. "Didn't I tell you all to shut up?" Dream Zoro yelled as he charged in. "What? I was just kidding that you were sleeping," Usopp cried out, making a mental note never to wake this guy up when he's sleeping. He'd rather wake up a bear from hibernation than a hungry shark. But Luffy and Monk Zoro were both starting their fight, easily able to take out the zombies that were coming at them. Yet with their sheer number and just the two of them, it could have taken all night at this rate. "Don't falter now," Absalom yelled. "Trample them to death. Damn it, there's no end to these guys." Dream Zoro cursed to Luffy, the two standing back to back as Brook was trying to catch his breath. Yet they got their first break when several of Robin's hands bloomed out of the ground. And the top hand opened up to reveal a small ball, which they recognized at once as one of Usopp's smoke powder stars. They could see where this was going now, and they were right when they saw the ball drop and burst so that they couldn't see anything but smoke around them. But they were able to see in time that thanks to the confusion, Dream Zoro grabbed Brook and they bolted, with Luffy yelling at them that they were to head back to Frankie's. "What a way to crash a party," Real Frankie laughed. "And I bet that they were all celebrating there, and from destroying the other portable shrines." "That is low," Brook stated as the memory faded around them. "To go about a competition in such a way. What do you expect from those losers?" Sanji sighed. "I swear, can't we meet any real rivals out here? Not just some pathetic assholes." "Well, I don't think that we need to worry about that for much longer," Zoro stated, thinking of Kid and Law. Something told him that they were going to have real battles from here on out. And he couldn't lie that he was looking forward to such a thing. Just then, the memory came back and they were standing in Frankie's workshop again just as Luffy came walking in happily. "Yep, saw this coming," Real Nami laughed. "Of course you did," Usopp stated, "like we were gonna roll over and take crap from guys like them without a decent fight." "Big talker," Sanji coughed under his breath. "We're back," he called as Monk Zoro helped Brook to walk inside. Everyone was working hard, sawing out new boards and sanding them down almost as fast as Frankie would hammer them together. "What?" Dream Brook croaked out when he saw them all. "Hey," Dream Chopper called when he saw them and smiled as if they had just gone out to get milk. "Welcome back. Good to see you," Makino said as she walked forward with Nami and Sanji, all of them carrying several large trays of rice balls. Luffy went running over to them and was drooling at the sight of all the food. Yet, Brook pushed himself upright and continued to look around as if he couldn't believe his eyes, not that he had any. "What are you doing, everyone?" he asked in bewilderment. "Well, what do I think that they're doing?" Real Brook asked, not sure if he really liked his dream self at this point. But it was Dream Chopper who answered him when he took a rice ball. "We're repairing the portable shrine," he said as if it was obvious. "That's," Dream Brook gasped. "But the race is tomorrow. You'll never make it in time. How much you wanna bet on that?" Real Frankie laughed. Of course they were going to get it done in time. After all, even in a dream, his super self was more than willing to take up the task. And his thoughts were shared by his dream self as he confidently told them that they'll make it in time. Dream Brook stared at him before he gasped, "Why? Why would you all go that far?" "For our dignity," they all answered without a second thought. "Damn right," Real Sanji stated. "If nothing else, we have to at least protect our pride. We can't just turn around and run without even putting up a fight," Dream Nami said. "But isn't that all you do?" Real Zoro asked Nami bravely, and she glared at him so fiercely that he shut up at once. You're right, said a voice, and behind Zoro and Brook came Lola and the Risky brothers with what was left of their broken shrine. We feel the same way. The rolling post office. Dream, Usopp said in surprise, but they weren't alone either. Looks like you're missing some parts, called Duval's voice, and he came out of the darkness with his own broken shrine that was in the shape of a giant bull, and a satisfied look on his face. Feel free to take anything you need from our broken shrine. And he gave a painful-looking wink. Oh, that's so kind of them. Real Brook cried out happily. Looks like they must have guessed that we were gonna fight back anyway and decided to help us out. Nami beamed, knowing that was something that the real Lola would have done. Well, an enemy of my enemy is my friend, Robin stated with a chuckle, a part of her wishing that she was in the scene as well and helping. But she could see herself as the role that she was given, staying out of sight but helping out when they needed it most. She felt strangely honored by that. Everyone was excited now. In fact, Dream Frankie was so touched that he slammed his splendid arm down and broke the bindings off before he and his sisters posed. He then proclaimed proudly, now, we can create the super portable shrine like the one I imagined. As they cheered, Dream Nami rolled up her sleeves and told them that they had a lot of work to do before morning. Makino and Sanji were getting ready to go and bring more food for them as the other teams came in to help. Even Monk Zoro was picking up a saw after he shoved more rice balls into his mouth. Though there was still one person who was left standing there, and Luffy noticed as well. Hey, what's up, Brook? Luffy asked brightly. Don't just stand there, help us out. Yes, it's alright, Real Chopper added, thinking that Brook probably still felt guilty about the whole thing, and Real Brook bowed low to him, with a little laugh. You're right, Chopper-san, he said as his dream self looked startled by the offer and stuttered that he didn't want to get in their way. But Dream Usopp went around and grabbed him from behind and forced his knees to bend so that they were both on the floor. You're already a part of our team, right? Usopp asked with a smile. Dream Brook looked back at him with a surprised look before Usopp got up and added, we're partners here. That's what friends are for, right? Friends? Dream Brook asked anxiously as he also got up, as if he had never heard such a thing. And when he looked around at them all, he saw that not a single person objected that idea, and tears began to form in his empty eye sockets again. Thank you all so much. He cried out tearfully. And Real Brook would have been smiling if he still had skin. He had doubted much about his counterpart here, but he could see now that it truly was like his spirit was there. This was him to a T. Hey you, Dream Nami yelled, making them jump, and they saw that Monk Zoro had been reaching for some of the rice balls, interrupting the touching scene. You're not getting any free food here either, Monk. She barked at him as he quickly swallowed his mouthful of rice. What? I had to help too. Real Zoro complained. No work, no food. Couldn't you see how much work had to be done? Nami retorted firmly as Dream Brook wiped his tears away with his sleeve. I shall play a tune to raise everyone's working spirits, he proclaimed, and he pulled out his flute and began to play his favorite song onto it in a sweet and light tone. And the dream faded when they saw them all getting back to work. The dream memory showed the next morning very quickly after that, and the first thing they saw was that they were standing in the middle of a huge crowd of people. It certainly looked like a grand jubilee was going on, much like during the Sakura festival. There were lanterns and decorations up all over the place, and you could see people walking around with toys and masks on as they ate, joked, and laughed with all their friends. But then their laughs turned to amazed gasps when what could only be the Thriller Company portable shrine coming up. You gotta hand it to them, Zoro said, slightly impressed. They sure did go all out on a race. All out, that's, Usopp began. Oz. Chopper finished with a yell. He was half right, the shrine was huge, in the shape of Oz, so that it towered over even the buildings on either side of the street. Where they had been able to hide something that big was a mystery to them. But below Oz, it looked like every zombie they had was carrying it when they finally reached the starting line. Though Oz was big and heavy, they had the manpower to move it. Real Sanji swooned happily when he looked up and saw Vivi there, with Chaka and Pell on either side of her, and Agaram about to start the race. They looked around worriedly, knowing that they had to get here now or let Thriller Company win. But just as Agaram raised his hand up, Makino's voice ran out through the crowd, please wait. Oh, good, Nami sighed. She had really been worried that they didn't make it in time. Agaram froze at the voice as Makino and Nami came out, and she shouted out, Restaurant Pinwheel is also competing. No sooner that she said that did the boys come running out carrying a much smaller shrine. It looked just like the Sunny, and it was rather nostalgic to see it there. Though instead of their pirate mark, it was the Pinwheel logo that was put onto the small sail. Luffy was the one riding on top while the rest of them were each carrying a corner of the ship and stopped right next to the Oz float. Hogback, Absalom, Perona, and Sindri were all riding inside Oz, and everyone but Sindri couldn't have looked more stunned to see them there. Sweet. Real Usopp cried out, looking at the matching orange jackets that their team were all wearing. Of course it'd be Sunny. Frankie laughed. Who better than the king of all ships? Yeah, Sunny. Chopper cried out excitedly as Luffy looked up at their competition. Already, you could tell the trash talk was about to begin. Thriller Company. We'll be the ones taking that treasure. Luffy taunted them and Agarum stepped forward again. Now we will begin the great portable shrine race. He called, with the sacred treasure as the prize. Thriller Company. Restaurant Pinwheel. It's a one-on-one battle. Get set. The real Straw Hats all jumped up onto the shrine, ready to ride along and see this without having to resort to running again. And before Iagram finished, a bang went off from what sounded like a firework and both teams bolted down the street. It started off fairly evenly matched, but things got dirty real quick. It came to no one's surprise when Thriller Company tried to run them right off the road, and right into several stands. In fact, Dreambrook ended up getting a couple fish stuck in his eye sockets from one stand and was now making jokes about how he couldn't see. Which resorted in Dream Sanji telling him off for that. How do you manage to stay so calm and make jokes all the time? Real Sanji asked in exasperation. Brook was just one of those people who could laugh in just about any kind of situation. The more dangerous the situation seemed, the more he joked about it. I am calm about most things, Brook answered cheerfully. And I trust that we will get there in the end. It's the journey that counts. But as they were getting back into the race, up ahead the Oz shrine had stopped moving and they saw why. The zombies had stopped to catch their breath from carrying the obvious weight. Rotting strength, Real Zoro stated with a nod. So it only makes sense that it would give out. With size they sacrificed movability, Robin added, but something tells me that problem won't last long. She was right, for at that moment, there was a great cracking sound and from Oz's arms and legs came large black wheels. Alright, Nami said with some hanging sweat drop, as the zombies all clambered inside Oz's body. Now you know it's a dream if things like this are suddenly turning into overgrown toys. Awesome, Real Chopper and Usopp cried out, their eyes shining brightly. Please, I bet ya all that Sunny there will be 3 times as cool as anything those chumps bring out. Real Frankie declared. His words were proven true when his dream self smirked while the others were staring in shock at what was in front of them. I guess it's time for us to show our true strength as well. He declared. He then reached into his coat and pulled out a bottle of cola before he shouted at Luffy to toss this into the Sunny's mouth. Luffy looked confused as he caught it, but did as he was told and lifted the Sunny's head so that they could see the inside. He popped the bottle inside and almost at once, Sunny's eyes began to glow very slightly. What happened next took them all by surprise, but for some of the boys, they were yelling out in excitement when they saw what was going on. Their dream selves had to drop the shrine from surprise, but that no longer matter. In the sides of the shrine, where the soldier dock system normally was on the real Sunny, it moved out and 2 large wheels had taken its place so that it looked an awful lot like how the paddles once looked. Luffy, I love your imagination, Real Frankie roared with laughter as his dream self jumped onto the shrine as well, telling everyone else to get on as well. At that moment, the 2 thrusters on either side of the ship seemed to blow up slightly for smoke billowed out, yet it was actually gaining power. Everyone else joined them on board and Dream Frankie yelled out, we're blasting off. And for a second it really did feel like they had blasted off. They were zooming along the ground so much faster than before, quickly catching up to the Oz. Dude, I have got to build something like this when I get back. Real Frankie laughed as Chopper and Usopp cheered at how fast they were going. Do it, Frankie. Usopp yelled excitedly as the women both shook their heads indifferently, not trusting themselves to even say how stupid it sounded. They were soon riding alongside Oz again and the ones inside that monster were staring down at them in shock once more. Absalom glared at the ship before he yelled out, that's against the rules, isn't it? He did not just say that, did he? Real Zoro asked and they all shook their heads in disbelief. He's got to be the last person to be saying anything like that. Real Chopper yelled out and he wasn't the only one who thought that. I don't wanna hear it from you. Dream Sanji yelled back. Neither one of them are really portable shrines anymore, Dream Usopp stated behind them as he looked around. Please, they move don't they? Real Frankie asked, waving his hand away as if just getting rid of a fly. It's like Brooke said, it's the journey that counts. I don't remember the rules ever saying that they had to be carried, we just have to get them from one place to another. Well said, Nami laughed a little, it's always good to try and figure out any loopholes, it could save you a lot of trouble in the end. The race continued on as if nothing had interrupted them. They went racing down the streets, left, right, left again, it was getting brutal since their shrines kept smacking into the buildings and tear the town apart. There won't be anything left of the town after this, Robin answered casually. Robin, why must you be so grim? Chopper cried out, though he could see what she was talking about. I get Oz destroying everything. Real Sanji yelled out, watching how Oz's leg ended up smashing right through a window. It's hard not to with something that big. But come on, they looked to the Sunny and how it crashed through another stand. Frankie, I thought you were a better driver than that. Hey, I'd love to see you do better. He retorted. But the argument didn't last, for it didn't take long for Thriller Company to try something else. The top of Oz's head opened up and Absalom was there with a bazooka in his hands as he grinned evilly down at them. Didn't take a genius to figure out what he was planning. Take this, he cried and he began to open fire. Dream Frankie was forced to move the wheel as fast as he could as he did his best to dodge the fireballs. But they knew that it was only going to be a matter of time before they got hit. You guys better think of something. Real Usopp yelled out anxiously. Now that it's come to this, Frankie's dream self hissed into their amazement. He bolted straight for the water, diving right in and things almost blacked out for a second. It looked like they were sunk at first, but through the waves the Sunny popped right up, with the wheels suddenly replaced by paddles. Just when I thought this little baby couldn't have gotten any cooler. Real Frankie laughed. Now they were really moving through the water, and Dream Brook was struggling to get a large fish out of his mouth, mumbling that he wasn't able to speak. In fact, Dream Sanji shook his head at him, clearly not interested in telling him off again. But to their surprise, Dream Nami and Makino came swooping down low on a flying fish. Nami had a map in her hands and was telling them that they had to head straight down the river, that it was shorter than using the bridge. They did what she told, and even in a dream, Nami was right on the mark. They reached the bridge in just minutes, around the same time that Oz did, though Perona was determined that they wouldn't get any farther. She jumped out and held her umbrella up as she commanded several zombies, supported by large bat balloons with flapping wings. Where did they get all this stuff? Real Usopp couldn't help but ask, worried about how Luffy's imagination thinks this stuff up. Luffy stretched out his arm and punched out the zombies as Dream Usopp fired his exploding stars, getting the balloons to pop. Yet with everyone he took out, another took its place. They just keep on coming. He cried out, sounding close to. I had anticipated this kind of thing too, Dream Frankie said. You anticipated this? Dream Usopp yelled at him. Doesn't everyone? Real Frankie asked in surprise. You're another one to watch out for, Nami whispered, wondering just who in their right mind could ever plan for something like this. But Frankie simply pulled a lever next to him and the floor opened up underneath Zoro and Sanji so that they ended up falling below the floorboards. What's that for? Real Zoro demanded. Maybe to make them lighter by throwing you two off. Chopper offered and Zoro and Sanji glared at him. Yet their answer came in the form of the Sunny's head opening up, and what burst out was like a combo of the Rocking Horse Waver and the Mini Mary. A waver with Mary's head attached to the front, and it was Sanji who was driving it while Zoro stood behind him with his swords on his hands. Now I know it's a dream, Robin chuckled, knowing that this would probably be the only few times that those two would work together without complaint. And work together they did, though they could hear the two arguing, which made them all feel a little more like reality. Before Dream, Zoro jumped into the air and took out all the balloons with a single stroke before the sky was filled with falling zombies. The Sunny quickly caught up with Thriller Company and they passed the bridge, heading to what looked like a small mountain covered with trees. There's the Grand Shrine, Dream Usopp yelled, pointing at the top as Zoro and Sanji jumped on board again. Dream Frankie nodded as he pulled out another bottle of cola, and warned them that this was their last bottle before tossed it over to Luffy. Real Frankie shook his head a little at that. You'd think that he'd have brought a few more than 2 bottles here. But Luffy tucked the cola into Sunny's mouth again, so that when they reached the shore, the paddles went back inside the little ship and the wheels were back. They burst out right in front of Oz before they headed straight up a long stone staircase. The real Straw Hats laughed at the stunned looks on their faces and were smirking just as widely as their dream selves as they went underneath a large stone arch and were already halfway up the stairs. Up and up they went for what felt like a mile, but they had quickly left Oz and the others behind them. They were going to win this thing for sure now. Look, Luffy yelled, it's the finish line. Go. But just as it looked like victory was theirs for the taking, something came flying in out of nowhere from the sky. Chopper and Usopp from both versions screamed in shock, for it looked like a combination of a monkey and a giant spider. He had the head, hands and even the tail of a monkey, yet the body of a spider. It had bandages wrapped around his hands, and wore what seemed to be an aviator hat, partially colored black, with one goggle covering his left eye. His right eye had shadows around it, and he was missing one of his teeth. Not that thing again. Frankie groaned at the sight of it, remembering how he and Robin were stuck in that thing's webs. I told Luffy about it, Robin sighed, knowing that this couldn't end well. She was right, the Dream Straw Hats seemed completely taken aback by this whole thing, but it turned out that this had to be Thriller Company's shrine's true form. For the 4 were riding on top of it while Hogback laughed. You're pretty good getting me to use my trump card, he confessed. However, he, Perona, and Absalom leaned forward and yelled out, this is the end. Dramatic as always, Real Nami sighed as the spider shrine held up its hands and shouted out, spider sticky net. Robin and Frankie both groaned at the sight of it. And out of its palms, the monkey shot out a thick sticky webs that trapped them like flies. They were hanging off the ground as the spider monkey laughed mechanically. It won't move. Dream Frankie cursed as he tugged at the wheel. Hey, can't you do anything about this? Dream Usopp cried out desperately. No, Frankie admitted in defeat. I had prepared something for this kind of situation, but, he opened his coat and added, we're out of cola. Note to self, always stock up on cola, Real Frankie whispered, reaching into his belly fridge and pulling out a cola bottle so that he could take a long sip. Both Dream Brook and Chopper screamed in terror, knowing that there was really nothing that they could do. The real Straw Hats couldn't believe that they were actually gonna lose to people like them and were bitter about the whole thing as Hogback laughed again. This is the end for you. Hogback proclaimed, and he caused the shrine to jump, getting it to launch itself right at them, ready to crush them. It was a tense moment. They were all thinking that this was how it was going to end, but they were saved at the last second by Nami and Makino standing at the top of the stairs with a crate of cola in their hands. "Those morons should have just kept going instead of trying to deal with us." Real Usopp laughed as the girls threw the crate and Luffy stretched out his arms to grab hold of it. "They wanted to make their victory absolute," Zoro said, shaking his head. Really, what were they thinking? Their dream selves got the cola and shoved it all into the Sunny's mouth before Dream Frankie pulled another lever and the mouth opened wide to reveal the Gon cannon, blasting the spider monkey to pieces, leaving nothing but a broken pile of rubble on the stairs and Hogback, Absalom, and Perona scattered on the stairs. The dream finally ended there where Luffy sent the three flying off into the sky with a good punch. With nothing else blocking their way, they crossed the finish line in a blaze of victory. The winners are Restaurant Pinwheel. They heard Agaram cried out and everyone was celebrating. They were also starting to throw their own party, but then something happened. The memory went dead, taking them all by surprise. "What's going on?" Chopper asked quickly, but before he could get an answer, the memories came back, yet this time it wasn't in that strange town. They were all in the bright sunshine and seemed to be surrounded by thick trees in the middle of what looked like some kind of jungle, yet before they could get their bearings straight, something was falling out of the sky and heading towards them. It was Luffy.
Respect to author.